look at the US Congress report recently, there was some report in the US Congress. They are still asking for internet to be restored in Kashmir. Now, you realize how out of touch with reality some of these narratives are. There is infrastructural development, which you can see very visible. It's very visible. There is a palpable perception of security. People can move around freely. We should take a moment to acknowledge that we are living through a historically very important phase. We should be lucky that we are in this country and not anywhere else in the world right now, because there is peace, there is development. They were like, oh, why are you supporting the government? And it was then that I realized for the very first time in 2020 that a lot of the criticism that we do, a lot of the criticism of the governments is for the sake of it. People in Kashmir, yeah, they thought that Afzal Guru has been hanged. For electoral gains, he was hurriedly executed. I want him to be released and clear his name because I believe that he's not he hasn't advocated terrorism. He hasn't advocated, any sort of dangerous ideology that at least I am aware of. Even if I become the prime minister, do you think that communalism will go in one day? It will not go. It will stay for hundreds of years to come. That is a reality. My message should not be that, भाई यहाँ इंडिया में बहुत discrimination है, आप घर पे बैठ जाओ, हमारा कुछ नहीं होना है. It shouldn't be like that. The message that I want to send out is that rely on your own experiences. There is no pressure on me. I'm living my life normally. Yes, there is the question of what I've said, and I am willing to apologize for it because I relied on second-hand information.
Namaste, Jai Hind. You're watching or listening to another edition of the ANI podcast with Smita Prakash. Thank you for watching or listening and for liking and subscribing and sharing with people who you think will benefit from watching or listening to these conversations. Now, many of you have written in to say that why don't you invite a politician from that political party or this political party? We do send out invites and we do get in guests who are willing to speak to us in a free-flowing manner, without any scripted interviews, without any scripted questions. My guest today is Shehla Rashid. I'm sure many of you will say, why do you want to give the platform to somebody who has said anti-India things in the past? You people will remember her from her JNU days when she made very strong vitriolic statements about Kashmir and about India. But listen in to this conversation. People often refer to Shehla as the poster child of the Tukde gang. Now, what is the Tukde gang? For expat viewers who are not familiar with the term, here's a short primer. The term was first heard in 2016 during the student protest movement at the Jawaharlal Nehru University campus in New Delhi. The students were protesting the hanging of Kashmiri separatist Afzal Guru when suddenly a cell phone video emerged where a slogan could be heard, Bharat tere tukde honge. India, you will be broken into pieces. Student leaders Kanhaiya Kumar and Umar Khalid were arrested. Ever since then, the term Tukde gang has been used by the right wing for those who are perceived as anti-national. Our guest today, Shehla Rashid, was part of the JNU student protest movement at that time, and she's had her sympathies with the Kashmiri separatists in the past, as also with the far-left agitationists. But she seems to have changed her stance a bit. In many of her tweets, she's seen praising both Mr. Modi as well as Mr. Amit Shah and the Lieutenant Governor of Jammu and Kashmir. So let's get started with this conversation, and you judge for yourself where Shehla Rashid stands today. Welcome to the show, Shehla.
Thank you.
I've been looking forward to speaking with you for a long time.
Thanks.
But we've been on opposing ends of the spectrum for a long time. So I guess there was mutual, skepticism maybe about how a conversation would go. But I'm glad you've taken the step and you've come to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I think it's a sign of the times that we are living in. There is a lot of polarization, and that is what I think drives skepticism. And there is labeling of one another as one thing or the other. So I think that's what causes the skepticism, I believe.
And I think you've done things which resulted in labeling. and journalists are always labeled. So, and especially women journalists. So I'm kind of used to the labeling. It doesn't get easy.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, years and years in the profession, when you get labeled, there are people who tend to say that you should have a thick skin, you should have the skin of an alligator, but it doesn't happen. And I'm guessing as an activist, you also you couldn't develop alligator skin. We are humans.
No, not at all. And especially like when we talk about social media, in the age of social media, all of the criticism, you can actually see it. Earlier, before social media, even if people were criticizing you, you couldn't see it. I mean, maybe you would hear something secondhand, but now it's directly, there is a very sort of ontological immediacy to it. It's very immediate. It's directed at you. You are tagged in it. You can see it. And initially, I used to take it in my stride, but eventually it affected me psychologically. And when I realized that, that's when I started to, in stages. I mean, it was very difficult to get rid of social media, but yeah, I had to do that for my own sanity.
So, your life it's a very interesting life. You've led a young life, but still you've gone through various stages which
Yes.
people take a lifetime to go through those experiences. You've gone through that very early in life.
That's right.
To understand what happened to you, what you did, why you did, I need you to go back to the 90s, simply because I think that must have been the most formative period of your
Correct.
thought process and what happened when you turned very critical against the political establishment. So let's go back to your life in Kashmir in the 90s to understand where you came from, what happened, what was childhood like. So go back to the background.
I mean, I grew up in a broken home, in a conflict zone. So I think that's not easy for anybody. Especially for me, watching my mother, get beaten up and face domestic violence on a routine basis. It certainly makes you angry. It makes you very sensitive to issues of injustice or perceived injustice. So you are what you can call me. I mean, I call myself a precocious politician. It's never too late for politics in India, but we were in some kind of hurry to, enter politics very fast. So I've done a kind of internship in politics, a 3 months internship in politics, during which I learned and unlearned a lot of things. But going back where it started from, why I was so sensitive to issues of injustice or perceived injustice, is because of what you witness at home, what you witness all around you, and of course the power of narrative, I would say. I mean,
Before we come to the power of narrative, tell me a little bit about your locality, where you lived, what were your neighbors, and you say that your mother faced physical abuse
Yeah.
at the hands of your father.
Yeah.
She was a government servant, if I
Yes,
wasn't
yes.
mistaken. She
Yeah.
retired from government
Yeah.
service. So at that time, did you and your sister, you're the only two sisters,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Did you seek help? Did your mother seek help? She was an empowered woman
Yeah.
at the workplace.
Yeah.
Why did she take the beating? Was there any family help? Could you give me a little
We lived in joint family, and it was in downtown Srinagar, which has been the hub of insurgency, and it's also where the Kashmiri Pandits. I mean, before I was born or before I could come to my senses, there used to be a lot of Kashmiri Pandits. So there used to be a lot of this narrative around ki all the good teachers are gone. Like
Because the Pandits were the
Pandits
teachers.
used to be the good, the better teachers. So I think we never had a the generations before us, they were really good at math, really good at grammar, and they owed it to those people. So it was a lot of like we've seen encounters, we've heard firing. There's that one incident where my sister, she was holding a pot of curd, like a clay pot, and there was a firing, there was a gunshot in the background, and it just fell from her hand. And to this date, like all of my friends, whenever we are at a party, Diwali party, say for example, there are crackers. So my friends, they don't get stunned. I get stunned very easily. So I think pretty much everyone in Kashmir suffers from PTSD. And when you combine that with there are problems at your own home, there weren't a lot of institutional mechanisms. As you know, the PWDVA Act, it has come only in 2005, the Domestic Violence Act, which is a good act, but it has come only in 2005. It wasn't there before. So there weren't a lot of mechanisms for us to, seek help. But there is this paradox of sorts almost, where women who are submissive and they are dependent on their husbands and they are homemakers, They actually, I don't want to undermine their struggles or anything, but they actually have it easier in a sense, because when you are working, you are expected to work, and then you are also expected to work at home, and then you are also expected to contribute financially. So it's like having two full-time jobs. So my mother, while she worked at the hospital, she was in the essential services. She's never taken a day off. But at the same time, when she would come home, so she would have to do all of this and then also put up with other things. So I think that I discuss this with my cousins quite often, that, why are working women facing more domestic violence? That's something of a, phenomenon. Because
So you saw your mother being, pardon me for saying this, but you saw your mother being beaten by your dad?
Yes, in fact, like I remember one incident, like when she confronted him over something. He hit her so hard that she left, in her left ear, she partially lost hearing. And that is a very traumatized upbringing. And then you have a trauma response to everything. So the moment you see some injustice, you just cannot stand it. You cannot stand back. You need to intervene. So even if it's some kind of, someone is beating up somebody else on the street side, you just can't hold yourself back. You want to intervene in that thing because it's so personal to you. So you develop that kind of, whether you call it sensitivity or trauma response, whatever you want to call it.
And you talked about your neighborhood. I've been to that neighborhood.
Yeah.
I've seen those locked homes of Kashmiri Pandits.
Right.
And I've also known friends who left from that area and their home was then occupied. Some kind of similar stories I've heard from family members who occupied homes of, partition victims. I mean, those who
Right.
left India and went to Pakistan,
Yeah.
and their homes were given to.
Yeah.
So those kind of stories, and it's probably wrong to draw parallels because Pakistan became another country. Here
Right.
it wasn't another country.
Yeah.
Here it was a
Internally
refugee.
displaced,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was. So it's a complicated kind of a story. Did you have friends who were Kashmiri Pandits in your neighborhood?
No, not really. We grew up in a pretty homogenous setup, because by the time we came to census, I think it was a completely Muslim population. But my parents' generation, yeah, they talk about it a lot. They had Pandit friends, but no, we didn't.
So growing up in the 90s, what was your surrounding like? It was, did you completely believe in the narrative that it was oppression by the center on Kashmir?
So earlier we didn't understand it. The censorship was at a very high level. So even though you saw things around you, you didn't talk about it at the dinner table. So for example, there was an
So it was
encounter.
a personally put censorship, right? I mean, there was no...
Yeah, I think the
Because
parents were
Kashmiri
afraid
media
of
was...
exposing the children to the conflict narrative. And even though it was all around, and that's the, sort of stunning thing about it, that there's an encounter happening. And there was something called a Mandir school. So where the locality where I come from, it's called Sona Masjid. And there is a Raghunath Mandir over there. It's a really large, it's a grand temple. But after the Pandits left, I believe it must have been deserted, and nobody was taking care of it. So the insurgents will often take shelter over there, and there used to be a school run from the premises. So even though there were these very clear, sort of indications or remnants of the past, so to speak, we never really talked about it. It was never discussed, the conflict, everything. At least in my home, it wasn't discussed. So maybe the parents didn't want, us to be exposed to that narrative. And it wasn't until 2010 that my generation became aware of the conflict in a very immediate sense as to what is, happening. Like before that, we knew like there's something going on, but we started talking about only in 2010.
But you saw the militants openly.
Yeah.
You saw all that
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
But when you say that parents didn't talk about it, but it was obvious all around you
Yes.
that militants. So in the 90s, India almost lost Kashmir, right? It was almost like it was talked about whether Kashmir can still be a part of India or not. That was the conversation which was happening around the world. And you were growing up in Kashmir. Did you believe in the Azadi narrative at that time?
Oh, we had no idea. I mean, there was one instance where my deceased Khala, she passed away in 2020. So she had an incident. We were very small at that time. She was walking through the Palladium Lane, and there was a bomb blast over there. And her, I think, right arm was nearly severed, and it was saved by a very miraculous surgery. But even then, despite all of this, at least in my family, it wasn't discussed. There was some kind of censorship where, it was probably so explosive a topic that we didn't talk about it. Despite, for 4 years she was in recovery. Her arm, it was like it took a lot of time to get back to normal. But we never talked about the conflict. And it's really the, street protests of 2008, 9 and 10 that really sort of give us an awareness that there is even a conflict. So till then there was no, I can speak for myself at least. There was no awareness of the conflict.
So what happened in 2010 for you and in Kashmir? Because there are many viewers and listeners, Shehla, who tune in, who live abroad. They are this post-conflict generation, right? Who are not aware of what happened in 2010. Instead of me giving an explainer, tell the audience from your perspective.
So these years of 2008, 9 and 10, which saw summer protests over one issue or the other. 2008 was the Amarnath land row. 2009 was the Asiya Nilofer incident. And 2010, it started with the Machil encounter and afterwards, the killing of a teenager. So there were a lot of summer, 3 summers of protest, you can say. And the media used to describe it as not just a protest but a siege because everything was shut. There were street protests, young boys, and I think it was a break from the 90s insurgency where young boys or young men, they had taken up guns. These people, they weren't armed. They were throwing stones at whatever the signs of the establishment, at the armed forces, police, whatever. And then the response was bullets. So a lot of people were killed in 2010, almost 110 people, young boys and including one girl, they were killed. So all of us started to think, oh, what's happening? Because these people were of our age. And I used to think at that time...
You were in school then?
I was in college. And I used to discuss with my friends, what if I weren't a girl? Because girls are more protected. But what if I weren't a girl? Would I have gone out in these protests? And, would I have been a part of those? So there was a lot of immediate awareness of the conflict. And you can say all of my college years, 2007 to 11, 3 of those years were simply lost. The academic calendar was simply...
What were you
lost
studying?
To. I did my engineering from NIT Srinagar, computer science engineering. And 3 out of those 4 years were simply gone, because of the protests and everything. And initially we used to think, oh, why are these people doing it? Why are they going out on the streets? Why are they creating this havoc? But 2010 was really when when the civilian casualties...
Why are people... So in your mind and between you friends, were you blaming the protesters or were you blaming the establishment?
It started with blaming the protesters in 2008. Of course, I'm probably speaking from a privileged perspective and all of that. It started with blaming the protesters. But in 2010, there was a Jat agitation somewhere in Haryana, and they also threw stones at the police. And there was no, the retaliatory action was not in the form of bullets, or pellets was much later, bullets or whatever, that wasn't done against them. And that, I think, that really made me think, why is this sort of dual treatment of Kashmiris, or, why are they human? The human rights narrative became very strong because, young, unarmed. I mean, they were armed with stones, but, technically not having guns.
You never
and all
took
of
part
that.
in any stone pelting?
No, it's all boys. It's girls have a much more protected life in Kashmir.
But there are girls who took part and threw stones too.
I think that was much later. Around 2016, I think that phenomenon started, as far as I remember. In 2010, there was only one girl who was looking out of her window and she got shot and she was killed. That also is, a turning point in the minds of many people. But yeah, as a girl, you have a much more protected life in Kashmir. Boys have it, they're much more exposed to those things.
So your sympathies were with the stone pelters at that stage?
In 2010, yes. I mean, the thing that we were saying is that the retaliatory action should not be so violent, people should not be killed. And that is part of, what... our main issue at that time was human rights. That was the narrative.
So among you students, what did you think would be an acceptable retaliation to stone pelters who were hitting at the forces at that time? What would have been a perfect
I mean, the state has a lot of things at its disposal. Say there
what
is
was
the
the
use of
conversation?
water
Water cannons,
cannons,
okay.
and all of that. Yeah, like that. But really, what it took, I mean, if we now
It
take
was Omar Abdullah who was the chief minister at that time, I
I
think,
believe
right?
so, but it's no different. Like 2016, it was the PDP government, I
PDP.
believe, and same kind of response.
They
So,
used water cannons with colored water at that stage.
Yes, yes.
That angered many people because if those kids are going to come back home in colored
Yeah,
clothes, and then they'll be identified by the cops when the Shinakt parade is done. So that was the anger. So water cannon was used, but even that was criticized.
You're right.
Right?
Yeah.
And as far as the pellet guns were concerned, that was the option which I think Kashmir used as opposed to the
Bullets, live bullets,
Yeah. So it was a crowd control that had worked in Israel, and that was a technology which was adopted in Kashmir at that stage. Am I right in saying
And
this?
there were a lot of people at that time who were drawing parallels to the Intifada of, the Gaza.
Correct.
But today, when I see, I'm much more grateful for today's situation, because today it has become clear that Kashmir is not Gaza. And what it has really taken is a political will. Somebody had to break this ice. Somebody had to break the stalemate, because Kashmir was just involved in this back and forth of protests and, sporadic incidents of insurgency, infiltration, all of those things. Somebody needed to break the ice. And for that, I would like to credit the present government, especially the Prime Minister, the Home Minister. They've ensured a political solution to it, which is, I would say, bloodless. And at a time when when the world is talking about civilian casualties in Gaza, I mean, you have to credit the establishment in Kashmir that there have been zero civilian casualties, since 2009, since the abrogation in the last 5 years. There have been zero civilian casualties in police action. And the abrogation, we were all up in arms. I went to Supreme Court.
Let's bring up the tweet on the screen which Shehla had made, in which I'm quoting, "Looking at the events in Middle East today, I realize how lucky we are as Indians. The Indian Army and security forces have sacrificed everything for security. Credit where it's due." And then you tag PMO India, HMO, which is Home Ministry, Manoj Sinha, who's the Lieutenant Governor, ADGPI, which is the Army, and Chinar Corps of the Indian Army, which is in Kashmir for bringing peace to Kashmir. I'm just reading it out because there will be some who don't know what IDGPI is, those who are not on social media all that much, on Twitter. So you said this when you were looking, and it brings me back to that period of the Intifada. I had even written about that at that stage, because I was, there was this romanticism among the youth in Kashmir about Intifada, right? And, everybody wearing the scarf and walking around, and you're seeing similar kind of visuals which are coming in rest of the world. Strangely enough, it's not happening in Kashmir. What do you think is happening? Why?
There are various aspects to this. The first aspect is that the present government, the government of India, they have started treating Kashmir not just as a security problem, but as a political problem. Because of Article 370 and 35A, there was this sense that we are separate. We have our separate constitution. We have a separate flag. For whatever it was worth, we may not be getting the facilities that people in the rest of India are getting. We may not be getting the same kind of treatment. But even then, there was this kind of, sense that we are separate or we are special or whatever it is. And it wasn't really serving any purpose, but people held on to it closely. Some people, I mean, of course, people who are pro-Azadi, they see it like as a red herring or something. They don't really consider it that precious. But those people who believed in the electoral process, etc., they held it as precious. They held it, people like myself, we used to say that, this is a sign of federalism, and federalism is good. It is within the ambit of the Indian constitution. But I think that, it is of course a consequentialist kind of yardstick that I'm applying here. It has served to end the psychological duality, this identity crisis, this hesitation to, say, are you an Indian or are you a Kashmiri? It has ended that thing. And that is one aspect of it. Like, it has been... Today you see these young children. They are going to the Republic Day parade, Independence Day parade. I think I'd written on Independence Day. They are participating in the festivities. Now, our generation, it was unthinkable that, we would participate in the festivities of August 15th organically, right?
But your mother did.
Yes, their generation did. Yeah, in fact, like they used to go to the Republic Day parades and all of that. And it was
Your mother's generation went for the Republic Day parade.
yeah, like my mother, I think, in fact, she went for the Republic Day parade in Delhi, and that was something that was unthinkable for our generation. So, I mean, if we have to live here in India and we have to live peacefully, then it was necessary to end this politically, this identity crisis, to deal with it politically. So I think that credit to the present establishment for not treating Kashmir just as a law and order problem and security problem, because it was not. I think they managed to correctly diagnose, touchwood, I hope I'm not speaking too soon, they managed to correctly diagnose the problem that this, it was giving a boost to a separatist kind of feeling, I would say, this separate flag, separate constitution, and, for whatever it was worth, it may or may not be serving our purpose, but it was there. So that's one. The second thing that is happening, the second important thing that's happening right now is that there is a congruence between Delhi and the state administration. There is a clarity as to what the objectives are. There is a clarity as to how to deal with the situation. There is no confusion. A lot of steps that the administration takes, a lot of steps that the state takes to end, to deal with the security situation, whether it's detentions or it's arrests or whatever cases, or even calibrated negotiations, whatever the steps are, there is no confusion. There is excellent synergy between the various security forces and even between security forces and the police right now. And the most important thing, now here's where I come in, and someone like me who has been vocal about human rights, who's been sensitive to this issue, our main ask was that civilian killings should not happen, right? They've not happened, as a matter of fact. The civilian killings, and in fact the security operations, they are done in a way so as to minimize the collateral damage and civilian killings. Plus, the Honorable LG administration, they've also ensured that wherever such lapses happen, there has been action against cops, there has been action against security forces. The Amshipura fake encounter, you might have heard about it in Shopian. There was a court-martial and an army man was sentenced to life for that. So these kind of, so if I had to describe the present administration, I have to credit, Mr. Manoj Sinha, his administration, the Lieutenant Governor. If I had to describe their 3 years in office in 3 words, I would say peace, accountability, and integrity. Recruitments are happening at a fast pace. I've qualified for the post of assistant professor, and there were 27 or 28 posts. And I don't remember the last time that, so many posts were filled. And in the last less than 2 years, I have appeared for the civil services preliminary examination at the state level, at the UT level, thrice. Less than 2 years, 3 prelims exams. That's faster than even UPSC. So recruitments are happening, and when I did not qualify, but when the interviews concluded at 2:30 p.m. on the day the previous result was declared, at 8:30 p.m. Within 6 hours, the result was made public.
Did you feel any discrimination when you were taking the exam?
I cannot allege any discrimination because I have been treated on merit and I have topped every entrance exam that I have qualified. I have just topped the assistant professor exam in sociology. So I cannot allege any discrimination.
Even at interview phase?
No, I got my interview went really well. I was asked to give a demo class and I got 11 out of 12 in the interview. So yeah, there is no discrimination.
Nobody asked you that, pardon me for saying this, but nobody said, weren't you part of the Tukde gang?
No. Nobody told me that. I was judged on my academic...
Did you expect that kind of a question?
I did, because I had earlier given a few interviews at the Kashmir University, etc. And yeah, that did come up. But the thing is that recruitments are happening at a record pace, and they're happening in a very transparent manner. When you're declaring the result within 6 hours of the conclusion of the interview, there's, no scope for... manipulation of that.
Okay.
And I think for that, you have to credit the LG administration. And I'm speaking just as a commoner. I'm not a spokesperson of any party. I don't hold a brief for anybody. Just as a common candidate who has given 3 civil services exams, who's given, I appeared in the UPSC exam, I appeared in the assistant professor exam. So just as a common person, I'm telling you what I see. There is infrastructural development, which you can see very visible. It's very visible. there is a palpable a perception of security. People can move around freely. I mean, if you come to Srinagar, there is the Jhelum riverfront. You can actually now see people taking a walk on that, like locals taking a walk. You know, I don't like to say, I mean, people, whenever they are asked how the situation in Kashmir is improving, they'll say tourism, tourism. It's not just about tourism. For the locals now, there are, you know, avenues. When we were growing up, we didn't have anything to do. Like our school would not take us for picnics because security situation. We did not have any avenues for sports. There was no cinema. There was no play area. Now there are all those things.
Didn't you, as a kid, ask this question of your mom? Like, there are children who, there are Kashmiris I've spoken to. I've had friends, of course, who bought into the separatist narrative.
Yeah.
They would go to Bangalore. They would go to restaurants, bars, pubs in Chennai, in Bangalore. Not so much in Delhi because they are recognized in Delhi. They would do all this in these cities. And when I would ask them that if you can do this here, don't you ask that why can't you have cinemas? Why can't you have Bollywood? Why can't you have cinemas? And wahan nahi ho sakta.
Yeah. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, all of us, like, we have sort of two lives. We have dual lives as Kashmiris. You know, outside, we'll go to cinema hall. But in Kashmir, we'll think that, you know, if we go to the cinema hall, like, what if there is an attack? What if there is a bomb blast or something? It is a real fear. I mean, I haven't gone to the cinema hall in Kashmir just yet, but a lot of people are going.
Yeah.
But yes, there was always this fear. When we are in Delhi, we don't think twice about going to the cinema hall. But yes, in Kashmir, it's an issue. Like, you know, it's not just a decision, chalo chalte hain, gaadi nikal ke chalte hain. It's not that simple. Like, it's a...
You can't even... There were no beauty...
It's almost an ideological decision to go to the cinema hall.
You remember Duktarani Millat and what they did to the beauty salons in Kashmir? You must have been in school at that time when it happened. It happened in the 90s, school, college or whatever. You were at that stage where they just stopped... That happened then. But it also went on for so many years. It went on for decades that, you know, if there were Kashmiri girls who were working in call centers or whatever, their pals would go to, go to get a massage done, a foot massage done. But if they were seen, then they were slapped. And beaten up. And whether in the street or whether at home, that why are you doing this? वो tourist हैं, वो बाहर से आए हैं, वो कर सकते हैं. तुम यहाँ की हो, तुम ये नहीं कर सकती हो. So that discrimination, I mean, you know, while you talk of censorship and discrimination by the state, this was self-imposed discrimination which was happening.
Absolutely. I mean, it's things that you do to survive. I mean, you don't want to get caught up in a, you know, sort of like vigilante incident. And yeah, you're right. I mean, if we oppose vigilantism in the rest of the country, we must oppose vigilantism in our state. It's just that, you know, we often make this demand of civilians that why don't you condemn terrorism? Why don't you condemn Duktarana Millat? It actually doesn't matter what we do, because the state needs to have the will to take action, to take some bold actions. And for that, you know, I really congratulate. I am, really impressed by how the government of India has handled the whole Kashmir situation. Because, you know, I used to think that I've said a lot of things about the BJP, I've said a lot of things about the PM, the HM. But look at them, like, they've taken so much criticism domestically. Internationally, India has been castigated for the abrogation, but they took all that criticism on them. And it doesn't make sense to me why somebody would, you know, make such a risky, unpopular, whatever you want to call it, decision. And I've arrived at one conclusion, you know, which is what caused my change of heart also. I've realized that the Honorable Prime Minister, the Home Minister, they are really selfless people who only care about the national interest. No matter how much, I know how much criticism we've made of the government, how much criticism the government faced internationally, domestically from the opposition. Why would anyone take so much criticism, you know, if it weren't for the national interest? And it has ended up serving the national interest. And of course, I understand it's not a deontological position, it's a consequentialist position that, you know, now we are judging the actions. But certainly, like, I should not continue to believe that I am the Miss Know-All. Maybe some people, they have a better reading of the situation. They've taken certain steps. And has it resulted in saving of human lives in Kashmir? It has. Has it resulted in progress, development? It has. Has it resulted in us enjoying better freedoms, like now children can go to the play area at the mall. These are very superficial things, but actually they aren't. Now there is sports infrastructure. I mean, there is a Kashmiri in the cricket team, and there are Kashmiris, they're doing very well in the Asian Games. There are so many, athletes
Many
who have
points
performed.
that, yeah.
Yeah. So these are, I mean,
They're not really superficial, no, Shehla?
Yeah.
Because you talk about trauma of growing up. You didn't have these things which to many people might seem superficial. I
Yeah.
guess the word comes naturally to you
Yeah.
because those are the terms which were used earlier for these
Yes,
things.
for these things. I
You
mean,
know?
also I'm a bookworm. I'm a bit of a bookworm, so I was never involved in any sports. My sister was.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
this is venting of energy. It was the same thing, those kids out on the streets,
Yes.
because they had nothing else to do. Okay, Shehla, let's take a closer look at this timeline of your tweets. Because, the criticism, which I'm sure even before the podcast is aired, it'll be like, oh, you brought Shehla Rashid. Because, there will be, the Kashmiri Pandits will be very annoyed because, you were a vocal supporter of the separatist narrative for some time, especially with the Afzal Guru incident. So there is like a no prisoners taken attitude by a certain section of the right-wing media who are not willing to forgive you for a certain number of
Sure.
tweets that you have done.
Yeah.
It's all right. You don't
Sure.
need to seek forgiveness or anything like
Right.
that. We're human. We are allowed to change of heart. But then they feel that let's get into that later. But, as that it impacted on so many things at that stage. The CAA never got, it was never implemented because of various things. You can talk about the fallout quite a bit as to what happened then. But let's talk about what many of them feel is that now that from becoming a Modi critic to becoming a Modi supporter, you've explained how it happened because it was organic, what you say.
Yeah.
But if you see the timeline, and many of them say that, the reason is because the lieutenant governor granted prosecution against you, because of your tweets about the army.
Yeah.
And in 2023, you and Shah Faesal, you withdrew pleas against the abrogation of 370.
Yeah.
For our expat viewers and listeners, Shah Faesal is an Indian bureaucrat from Kashmir who resigned from government service in 2019, citing unabated killings in Kashmir. His resignation wasn't accepted and he was reinstated in government service in 2022. But between this period, he, along with Shehla, who's our guest today, formed a political party in Kashmir, and that seems like it was a non-starter. So back to you, Shehla. In August 2023, you started praising the centre and the Lieutenant Governor of Jammu and Kashmir in particular. You've explained as to how the change of heart happened. What do you say to critics who say that this deeper connection is superficial? Use your word superficial. That the deeper connection is superficial. It's because of legal issues that you were mired under.
So two things. First of all, I started supporting some of the executive actions into 2020, which is the pandemic year. So at that time, I had supported the lockdown, and because I hadn't made any overt overtures towards the government or whatever, I was still surrounded by an echo chamber that immediately shut me down. They were like, "Oh, why are you supporting the government?" And it was then that I realized for the very first time in 2020 that a lot of the criticism that we do, a lot of the criticism of the governments is for the sake of it. And that's where I come again to the point of polarization, that just because Mr. Modi is doing something, we have to oppose it.
We bole to Kashmiris?
The narrative, the left liberal ecosystem, opposition, whatever you want to call it, critical, let's just call it, people who are critical of the government.
The echo chamber that you're talking about?
Yes. I was very much part of that echo chamber. Yet, I still saw, in countries like Sweden, etc., where the governments did lock down, people protested against it. They said, no, you cannot lock down because citizens' rights, democracy, etc. And in the US, where the Trump administration did not lock down. Teachers, you must have seen some of the posts by teachers. They were saying, you are sending us to the death row by not shutting down, right? So what was the choice with the government in 2020? To shut down or to not shut down? So I think it was a classic damned if you do, damned if you don't situation for a government. And I feel that the government had no choice but to lock down, right? But there was this entire conspiracy theory around it. There were a lot of conspiracy theories around, the pandemic. Like one of the conspiracy theories was that this is part of some global push for financialization, towards a cashless economy, greater financialization. It's a big corporate. So British political conspiracy theorist David Icke, like I listened to him also at that time, and he said that this is nothing. COVID is nothing, but it's just a global, sort of conspiracy theory to push financialization. And we used to think in India, and I must admit I'm one of those people who would say that this digital is, Digital India is just part of that greater push for financialization. UPI is just part for that, and it's going to help the bigger corporates. But what did I actually see? I mean, I actually conducted field work, and I saw, because my research is on the political experience of digitality in India, and I conducted field work, and I realized that, the evidence on the ground does not support that conspiracy theory that COVID is a push for financialization across the world, etc. It doesn't support that. And UPI is not part of that, because UPI is not helping the bigger corporates, or it is not helping the already creditworthy. It's actually helping build creditworthiness for a population which is hitherto, unbanked. It has helped the greengrocers. It has helped the hawkers, the coconut vendors, the chapri walas, there's a girl who is, giving this home beauty services during COVID because all the beauty parlors were shut down. It is helping her. So it's actually making our population bankable. It is not comparable to the credit card movement in the West, because the credit card rests on the assumption of, the credit card needs creditworthiness. You can't just get a credit card. That's not the case with UPI. It's not pushing that. It's actually making our population bankable. And this is when, in 2020, this is when I started realizing that some of the things that we say do not add up. So frankly, Smita, I had to give up, those ideologies and those prisms, which neither had explanatory power nor predictive power. So I had to give up those deterministic kind of narratives, which neither had any explanatory power nor predictory power anymore. So I had to give up those kind of discourses, and I had to step outside of the echo chamber, and I had to look at things from my own perspective. Now herein comes my research, because my research is on the political experience of digitality in India. What I found is that there is a big difference between how the political experience of the digital happens in the West and how it happens in India. In the West, it is very well documented by now that there is these algorithms, the algorithmic governance, because, in the West, there is paucity of labor. So the push is on automation of services, which is not the case in India. I mean, you still have a human interface and complete data sets. I'll come to that. But in the West, there is this push for automation because labor is less. And governance, for example, allocation of welfare. I've studied some of these things. So in Britain, some people are just shunted out of the pension system, and there's no way for them to appeal. So what these algorithms are doing in the West is that they are encoding white privilege. And scholars have called it automating inequality. So that's the phrase that is used for it, automation of inequality. So you're just taking existing inequalities, you're putting them in an algorithm, and they're getting automated and they're getting amplified. That's not the case with Digital India, because first of all, our data sets are complete. There is no like racial segregation in India. There's no such thing. The data sets are complete. Everybody has an Aadhaar, and there is no automation, or there is no encoding of privilege. Everybody, the Digital India, I mean, that's been a big part of, why I have sort of exited the echo chamber, so to speak. Digital India is secular. It does not encode any racial or, anti-minority bias. And I can tell you that because I went looking with a microscope. I wanted to extend this, this was my research is in political science. So I wanted to extend this Western narrative of automation of inequality. I wanted to see how it operates in India. I went to these CSCs, the service, the Aadhaar centers and all of that. I interviewed people. I actually looked at instances. Personally speaking, I applied for a domicile certificate post-abrogation. I think I was one of the first people to apply for a domicile certificate because there were so many anxieties that, now our state subject certificates do not hold any value. Now people from outside will come and they will be given our everything.
Outside bole to outside Kashmir.
Outside Kashmir, yeah. And there were these, fears of a demographic inversion almost, that अब 370 चला गया, अब बाहर के लोग आके बस जाएंगे, इनको सब कुछ मिल जाएगा. There were
Which
these
is
anxieties.
what, not just the separatist narrative, it was also the narrative which was fueled by the politicians of mainline politicians. We saw this by Mehbooba Mufti, we saw it by Farooq Abdullah, Umar Abdullah, everybody. It was that our lands will be taken away.
Yeah. So that was the general, like everybody, that was the commonsensical. It was a kind of like, thing that everybody says. But what did we actually see? I mean, if you're a rational thinking individual, you have to take an objective view of things. So out of this anxiety, I was one of the first people to apply for a domicile certificate. And voila, I just got my domicile certificate, There was no discrimination based on my political ideology or my faith or whatever. No, there was none. The entire process was automatic. I did not have to supplicate before any political authority or any bureaucrat to get my domicile certificate. And that's also when I realized, oh, okay, so there's no big conspiracy happening here, right? I mean, how many people, the Honorable Home Minister, he also said it in his speech in Srinagar. He said that how many people have come from outside. It's true. Like, he also acknowledged this, that there was this anxiety. And that's when I realized that the digital India, it's not like, the experience of the digital in the West. It's different. The digital India is secular by design. And it does not encode any, anti-minority bias or anything like that. So that's when my research started taking a different direction, because I went to the field with a critical orientation. And what I found was that, India needs to be not castigated, but celebrated for the implementation of digital India, because it has not served the big corporates, etc. Everything works great. So if I use DigiYatra, there's no point for me to romanticize backwardness for other people. I should not be a hypocrite. What I do myself, if I use UPI, I use DigiYatra, I use DigiLocker, then why should I, keep on opposing it? So there was the question of intellectual honesty involved over there. And as I said, this started in 2020. Yes, you talked about this, sanction given by the LG and all of that. I would say to that the political process and the, judicial process, they are different. Our courts are not determined by what is said on social media or, what a politician. Courts are independent. This is not some kangaroo court we are talking about. This is the Indian judiciary. The judiciary and the executive, they are separate. So no, like I
your
would say
commendation, Shehla, it coincided with your sharing of an interview featuring Rais Mattu, the brother of Hizbul terrorist Javed Mattu, and Rais displays the Indian national flag in that video, and you posted it, and he says in an interview that he waved the Tiranga because it was part of his heart, telling him that, and there was no pressure on him. Was there any pressure on you? Because you were saying that it is when you did your research, you got to know and you willingly stepped out of that echo chamber of which you were part. Your critics will say that there was pressure on you by the left wing, because there are people who will not, from both, from those whose company you have left and from those whose company you refuse to be in. Both of them are critical of you to say that you must have come under pressure, otherwise how could you have done this?
There was nobody pressured me. I've been living my life quite peacefully. As I told you, I mean, if there was discrimination, they could have given me a 0 in the interview, or, I could have been barred from the process. There is no pressure on me. I'm living my life normally. Yes, there is the question of what I've said, and, I am willing to apologize for it, because I relied on second-hand information to say some of these things, even though, I can say a lot of things to contextualize it, that I said good things also about the administration, they were taken out of context, etc. All of that is fine. But as I said, the judicial process and the political process are separate. This is not the People's Republic of China, where the judiciary and the executive are one. No, the judicial process will go on separately, and this will go on separately. But it's a question of intellectual honesty. It's also a question that, when something good is happening, if good things are happening in Kashmir, what should we do? I mean, you look at the US Congress report recently, there was some report in the US Congress. They are still asking for internet to be restored in Kashmir. Now, you realize how out of touch with reality some of these narratives are. And at the same time, like, when I said good things about Kashmir, of course it wasn't without backlash. I understand that. But it's a question of like backlash versus intellectual honesty. So should I be worried about the backlash, or should I just be honest with myself? There should be some integrity. I mean, there's this black feminist called Bell Hooks. She talks about integrity when there is congruence between your beliefs, thoughts, and action. So as I said, if I am using Digi Yatra, if I am using whatever, UPI, etc., I haven't handled cash in like 2 years, I think. So why should I then continue to, hold these I used to be anti-Aadhaar at one point, but why should I hold that view anymore? When I see that it's working perfectly, so I'll give you an example. I talked about Digi Yatra, right? So in the West, there is an entire body of literature on how the facial recognition systems actually exclude Asian, black minorities, and they only encode white privilege. Have we seen such an instance in India? Is there any instance where, somebody from a certain region of India has been not recognized by Digi Yatra? You tell me if there is any such instance. There isn't, actually, because we don't have those problems. Like, we don't have a deeply rooted racism in our country. And I think that the present moment, where we see religious conflict, open religious conflict across the West, across the world, there is confrontation on the streets between Jews and Muslims, between Christians and Jews, whatever. In India, we don't see that. So I think we should take a moment to celebrate our own, deep-rooted secularism instead of looking for Western models of secularism. And I'll be honest enough to say that I'm one of those people who used to
see only discrimination.
Yes, see only discrimination, and look at how great the West is. They have such strong statutory protections. Where are those statutory protections now? There is open anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, whatever, you name it. Everything is out there on the streets. Where are those strong statutory protections?
Because you had said, you were very critical of some BJP politician. I have to put it in context because
Sure.
About the anti-Muslim sentiments regarding conversions. And I'm reading from your tweet, you had written sharpest decline in birth rate among Muslims from 1992 to 1915 to 2015. Also, neither migration nor conversions have had any impact on the religious composition of the country. Conversions are rare in India. It shows you how baseless the ruling party's propaganda is. Your stance has changed since then.
Yeah.
I'm also going to read out what the Minorities Affairs Minister had stated this year as per the population report, a technical group on population projections 2020, July 2020. The National Commission on Population country's projected population in 2023 stands at 138.82 crore. Okay, according to this, applying the same proportion of 14.2% as was the census in 2011, the projected Muslim population in 2023, because there's no census, it would be 19.75 crore. When you have 19.75 crore Muslims, that's like entire countries' population.
Correct.
In many places,
Yes,
right?
yes.
In a Hindu majority country, when you have 19.75 crore Muslims,
Yeah.
do you see the kind of discrimination as, say, a New York Times or a Washington Post literally on a weekly basis is putting out?
Yeah.
You don't see a counter narrative happening at all because I guess Indian media is just exhausted. Or Kashmiris or Indian Muslims are exhausted and say, why the hell should we keep saying that, no, there is no discrimination, which you are saying today, that you didn't find any discrimination.
Yeah.
Is it right or is it wrong to expect from the Muslim community to speak out like you have spoken out today, that there is no discrimination in, say, getting an ID card, in going to a pub, in going to a movie hall,
Yeah.
in sitting for the UPSC exam,
yeah.
right? Is it unfair to ask the Muslim population to speak out like you're speaking out today?
So there are 3 or 4 things here. First of all, is there communalism in this country? Yeah, sure. Like 70 years back, we were partitioned on a religious basis. So we cannot say that communalism began when BJP came or, it began in 2014. No. We've been partitioned on religious lines and it was a very bloody partition. It was not a pretty sight by all accounts. So yeah, there has been communalism and there will continue to be communalism. At the same time, the problem with the critical orientation is that we only focus on the negatives. we forget to celebrate the positives. Are there positives? Yes. I mean, scholars of secularism like Professor Rajiv Bhargav, they talk about Indian secularism and they compare it with the like Western secularism is rooted in statutes and all of that. But Indian secularism, which is more appropriately called pluralism,
and lived experience.
lived experience, uh, that is civilizational in nature. So whatever incidents you see, for example, the partition, there is some riot, there is a phase of mob lynchings. So Professor Rajiv Bhargav and other scholars of Indian secularism, they will say that this is a blip on the radar. Our nation will survive, our plurality will survive, because this is in a much longer tradition, because there is a much longer tradition of pluralism, which is different from Western secularism, if you academically analyze it. So our pluralism is much more civilizational, rooted in nature. And that is, when I talk about the present moment, we see that, we don't see the sort of, I'm sorry to use the phrase, but the proverbial clash of civilizations that we are witnessing across the world right now in this moment. We don't actually see it in India because there is no clash of civilizations. It is one civilization. And Dr. Tanveer Fazal, who is a sociologist, he has pointed this out in one of his papers, that Muslims in Delhi, during his fieldwork, he found that they reject this classification of minority, and they say that we are the second largest majority. So the first largest majority being Hindus and the second largest majority. So when you point out that, the Muslim population is going to be so and so, it's correct. Actually, the Muslims themselves, as per academic experts, they classify themselves as the second largest majority.
Where 200 million is what President Murmu said.
Yeah.
So how can 200 million be a minority?
Yeah.
Right? It's a country in itself.
Yeah. We've had communalism and we will also have pluralism. See, for the next 100 years to come, even if whoever is claiming right now that, BJP is bad, even if I become the prime minister, do you think that communalism will go in one day? It will not go. It will stay for hundreds of years to come. That is a reality because India is a humongous country. And yes, there were incidents of mob lynching. There were some unfortunate statements made against Muslims. Yes, do they hurt you as a Muslim? Yeah, they do. But what do we need to do? I mean, as Muslims, what do we need to do? Do we keep focusing and harping on that narrative, on the negatives? I don't think so, because we've lost years doing that. This is our country as much as, it is anyone else's country. And the Home Minister, when he came to Srinagar, he said that to Kashmiris. He said, this is your country. Go live wherever you want, do whatever you want. These were his exact words. He said that this is my country as much as this is yours. And our country right now, I think we should take a moment to acknowledge that we are living through a historically very important phase. We should be lucky that we are in this country and not anywhere else in the world right now, because there is peace, there is development, and we've just overtaken our former colonizer, the United Kingdom, as the 5th largest economy, and we are headed for the spot of the 3rd largest economy. So when you say what should we expect of Muslims, first of all, I should start with myself. I should myself take responsibility. Have I in the past contributed to the victimhood complex of the Muslims? I may have, some of my statements, because I kept harping on those incidents. I ran a campaign against lynching. So have I contributed to that narrative of victimhood? Maybe. So what is my responsibility right now, and what should be my message to the Muslims of this country? Should it be that भाई यहाँ पे डिस्क्रिमिनेशन है, आप कुछ मत करो, आप घर पे बैठ जाओ, पढ़ाई मत करो, compete मत करो, don't come to public life? I don't think so. That should not be my message. My message should be that development is secular. Our country is headed for greater heights. We are literally reaching for the moon and beyond. And at this time, we may need to ignore some noise. There is the election coming up. Someone will say something. We will have to behave as a model minority, which like the Indian American community is called, usually the model minority. We'll have to ignore some of the noise because that noise is meant to distract us. And we will have to focus on how we can contribute to the development of this great nation.
Why is it that Kashmiris could not ignore that narrative which came in from Pakistan at that stage? Because a lot of it was, the Azadi was fueled by prime ministers, presidents, army chiefs of Pakistan for decades together, that you can never be part of the Indian mainstream. You're a Muslim majority state. You're an Indian Muslim. You don't you don't belong. And that was swallowed hook, line and sinker by Kashmiris. At what point of time, as a Kashmiri, living in Kashmir and outside Kashmir in rest of India, you've lived in both places.
Right.
As a Kashmiri, where do you think that narrative faltered, and where did you see that narrative didn't click anymore in Kashmir?
I was born, in the 90s, and I've read Wajahat Habibullah's book. And it's not just a question of narrative in Kashmir. He has clearly pointed out, being a former senior bureaucrat himself, he has clearly pointed out that there was a mishandling of the Kashmir situation, just to serve the interests of certain people or certain parties. The national interest or the Kashmir interest was sort of held hostage to those things. And the inflection point, everybody in Kashmir will tell you this. I'm sure you heard it during your visits. The inflection point was really the, rigging of the 1987 elections, because Pakistan had been extending arms support 20 years prior. The border was almost porous before that. It wasn't even so fortified. Pakistan had been extending arms support. People didn't take it for 20 years, the Zia-ul-Haq administration and all of that. But in what changed in 1987? It was a mishandling, it was a rigging of the elections. It was like the total, Wajahat Habibullah has written in his book in great detail, because I wasn't born then, so I don't know. But these were the people who had actually wanted to contest elections. They were the ones who took up arms. They were the ones, people who would have been MLAs otherwise. They crossed the border and they took up arms after that, right? So now the present government, what they are doing right is that they are investing in grassroots democracy. Because if it is a failure of democracy, that was the inflection point in, actually fueling the insurgency. Then what the present government is doing right now in building institutions, in ensuring that there's grassroots democracy, in ensuring that the process, the institutions work for everyone equally without discrimination, I think that is an investment in peace. And I hope I'm right. I hope I'm not speaking too soon, so I would say touch wood, I'm a little superstitious. But yeah, these things I think will make everyone stakeholders in peace. I think the problem earlier was that there were very few stakeholders in the political process, in the electoral or democratic process, whatever you want to call it. And now there are around, 30,000 panchayat members, at all levels combined. So there are more stakeholders in peace. And another important thing that the government is doing, earlier, Panch, Sarpanch, they would be routinely attacked by insurgents or infiltrators from Pakistan. They would be routinely, victims of terrorist incidents. But that is not happening now. Now the state is standing behind. The state is actually backing its representatives.
In your years as a student activist, whether in Delhi or when you were in Kashmir, you didn't buy into the Pakistani narrative of separatism?
Pakistan is not even a sort of reference point in... whatever questions I've raised as an Indian citizen. When I was a kid, before I had any awareness of this conflict, I memorized the Jan Gan Man myself. I learned how to sing it. I would, draw the map of India. I would memorize where every state is. I would draw the national flag.
And Kashmir was part of India
conflict.
In the map.
There was no conflict. In my diary, I had written a book-length thing in my 8th grade. That what are the problems facing India, whatever, I used to read these civil services magazines, competition success review and whatnot. So what are the problems in India? Dowry, corruption, whatever. So the national problems were my problems. My problems were not communalism and human rights back then, right? So I cared about everything that, any regular XYZ person preparing for civil services would do. So I used to read these competition success review and Yojana and whatever. And I had written a book-length thing about what are the problems facing India and what do we need to do, right? So it was never, there was never the separation in my head until 2010. However, even after 2010, like many people will say, "Arey, ye to separatist hai, ye to anti-national hai," but no. I think of myself as a first-class citizen of this country. I think, as the Honorable Home Minister also just pointed out, that you are as much citizens as I am. And I truly believe that. And so that's why whatever questions I've raised, whatever questions I've asked of the government, of the army, of the institutions, whatever, I've raised those not as a Pakistani, but as a citizen. Yes, a Kashmiri Indian, there was this kind of hyphenated identity of sorts, certainly. But I raised those questions as an Indian, nevertheless. Okay. So, when 370 happened, when abrogation happened, I did not go to the Pakistan Supreme Court or the International Court of Justice. I went to the Supreme Court of India. And when I withdrew my petition, I also withdrew it with the realization that there is no point in, opposing something that is having good results. My activism, did it yield good results? Did it give people their human rights? No. Did the government's actions give people their individual rights, human rights, whatever, dignity? Yeah, it did. So, why should I keep being the sort of agent of chaos? I don't want to be an agent of chaos anymore. Of course, I've gone to a university where, there is a lot of critical orientation that you receive.
JNU you're talking about?
Yes, yes. And it's a sort of rite of passage for every thinking aware individual, this flirtation with revolutionary politics in their 20s. I don't want to undermine it. I've, of course, learned a lot of things from that. I've learned to analyze. I've got the analytical capability to talk about things from that revolutionary phase. But there are good things happening right now. And rationality and objectivity requires us to acknowledge that and not just attack our country, for the sake of it. Just because a certain person is doing it or a certain party is doing it. My greater concern is that I've seen how polarization can damage the fabric of democracy.
Did you go to rallies or did you sit for when cricket matches going on and Pakistan Zindabad? Did those things happen and did that cause any conflict if it did happen around you?
No, not really. First of all, I've been a bookworm since childhood, so I was never into sports. But I understand. I'm not oblivious to the fact that cricket is a highly polarized sport. But yes, that is changing. Now with...
You remember that incident when those girls in the hostel,
there were a lot of... there have been a lot of such
even
incidents.
tweeted that they're being held out there in the room and things like that. Okay, I'm going to come to... the JNU part, Shehla, because you just brought it up. Two things I want to bring is one is the Shopia incident. I want to bring that also. But let's get out of Kashmir for a bit, a breather. Let's talk about your life in JNU. In that one day, Shehla, the lives of 3 students, which is yours, Umar Khalid and Kanhaiya Kumar, it changed. Tell us about that. We'll come to what happened with Kanhaiya and Umar Khalid later. But do you feel that one protest was a life changer for you? What happened that day? What happened during that protest?
So it was not just a life changer for the 3 of us. The entire university's life, the entire university sort of suffered the consequences of that incident because there was so much backlash against anything to do with JNU. So in, overnight, from being an elite university, the queen of liberal arts and social sciences, etc. It just went, JNU became a slur. It was almost like a cuss word. And anyone who's not even from JNU, but who is perceived to be critical and whatever, the term used to be, used against them that, "Arey, ye to JNU type hai, ya JNU wale type hai, is type ke." So JNU actually became a slur. And, I've studied at CSSS, which is one of the, the sociology center in JNU. It is globally one of the top centers in sociology. But yes, those, what happened that day, I wasn't present there physically, but what happened that day, everyone saw it on TV. And yes, it certainly did a disservice to our university because those kind of slogans were never raised by any student. They were raised for by people from... We've had protests. We've had a culture of protests ranging, dating back to 1975 and whatnot. There have been protests before that day. There have been protests after that day. No such slogans have been, raised. What are the usual slogans in JNU? Lal
Bharat
Salam.
Tere Tukde honge.
Yeah, those kind of things. They've never been raised. The kind of slogans that we raise is Lal Salam and all of those things. Everyone knows the usual slogans.
The communist slogans.
The communist slogans, yeah, left-leaning, whatever.
And you were a member of the ISA, so those slogans
In fact, I was an elected member of the student union at that time, yeah. And the event was held by a private group. But that's the thing about JNU. We don't really stop anyone. Tomorrow if the ABVP decides to hold some protest, the student union has no say. We will not say, no, you will not hold this protest. So yeah, the student union could not have said, please don't do this, because they were well within their rights. And the thing is that we suffer the consequences of our choices, basically. However, the consequences of that protest, they were not faced just by the organizers or the people who raised those slogans, but by the entire university, world-class professors. They had, show cause notices against them, in the protests that ensued and all of that. So yeah, I mean, the scholarships were cut, like the infrastructural funds and everything, because the university was demonized. So yeah, we all suffered the, consequences of that.
Do you feel
one
responsible
incident.
for that?
No, I do not personally feel responsible for it, because it was not my area to either, stop them or anything. I wasn't present there. Even if I were present there and I had asked them to stop it, they would have probably not
But
stopped.
there were pictures of you sitting with Kanhaiya and Umar Khalid.
No, not on that day, no.
Umar Khalid was one of your... he was your friend.
In the protests that followed, in the protests that followed, we all came together as a university and we started, saying that, it became a save JNU kind of moment. So it went beyond those slogans, everything. When the student union president was arrested, that is something that had only happened, during the emergency. So people drew parallels to that, and there was this perceived, threat to the university that we sort of fought against. And yes, like in that moment, everybody sort of galvanized together. So yeah, I mean, due to that, because the incident was like overblown and all of that, those kind of differences vanished, and the entire university, I mean, earlier, frankly, when we would go for protests and all, we would be just begging people, aajo protest mein. We would, struggle to gather 10, 15 people. But what those arrests did is that organizations which did not even have a following of 15 people, now they got an audience of not just the 4,000 students at the university, but the entire country. So yeah, I mean, it was, it gained a life, it snowballed into quite another thing.
Deepika Padukone came for the protest, and that got a lot of attention. There was the celebrities who came in. Rahul Gandhi came in at that time. Politicians gave support. It became a very big thing. Did you at that point think that this, because you were a revolutionary, you were part of the All India Students Association. It is a far left or
from
a
where
left.
You see it, but within JNU we are the parliamentary left, so we are actually in the center.
You're centrist.
But yeah, this kind of nuance is only sort of
it wasn't a leftist. Wasn't it a radical overthrow the government of the day?
It depends on from where you see it. So
okay,
in JNU,
so tell me where do you see it?
50 shades of left in JNU, and so first you have the ABVP, which is far right, NSUI Center, whatever you want to call them. Then you've got the CPI affiliated AISF, of which Kanhaiya was a part. So they are like nationalist and whatever. So then you've got the CPIM, which is the Sitaram Yechuri party. So the student faction associated with that is SFI. And after the Singur Nandigram thing in Bengal, SFI had become kind of marginalized. So then ISA filled in that vacuum. So earlier only SFI would get elected. And then ISA came in. And ISA was affiliated with this like ML liberation kind of group. But within JNU...
ML mat bolo, it's clear. ML mat boli to Marxist, Leninist.
Yeah.
So फिर अगर left, extreme left नहीं तो क्या है शैला?
So it is the parliamentary left. So parliamentary left is student groups that fight elections.
I like the way you just
to the student
union.
Yeah,
it is Marxist-Leninist.
Yeah. Okay. No, sorry, I thought that was evident. So, this is the parliamentary left, so to speak.
No, it's evident probably for my generation,
for
and for people
JNU,
with JNU or say Jadavpur University or some people in Kerala. For the rest of India, especially those who are the younger people who are in this,
Yeah, they'll be wondering what is ML.
Yeah. They're not aware of the
they'll
communist
probably think machine
movement.
learning,
Okay.
So this is the parliamentary left, CPI, CPIM.
So you
ISA,
are the left.
all of that.
You were part of the extreme left.
No, parliamentary left is not from where we saw it, definitely.
उससे left कौन था फिर?
So there were other student groups which would not contest elections. So we were in the student union because we contested the elections to the student union. So contesting
election
was a test of whether you are sort of parliamentary left or non-parliamentary left. So parliamentary left is student groups that fight elections.
So you didn't reject democracy. That was your
no, not at all.
claim to be part of the establishment.
We are in the center.
You're in the center just because you were contesting elections.
So some like people on the far left, they would call us what we would describe as the far left. They would call us Sarkari left. So that kind of a thing,
You were part of the Sarkari left of JNU. Okay. So now, how did the Tukde term then get associated with your group? And how did it take? How were you impacted because of that? You were
It
called the
got
poster
associated
girl
with the
of.
whole
Huh.
university, and I think that media has made. I mean, I would hold the media responsible for repeatedly, repeating that phrase on loop for, I don't know, it has been 7 years or something since then, but they haven't stopped using that term. So I would obviously, I'm not very happy about it. I don't like that categorization because it is a good university, and it's at least it used to be. I mean, now I'm not in touch with the university anymore. I don't go there very often. But yeah, like we used to take pride in the fact that literally an MP's daughter and a peon's son, they study in the same class, they sit on the same bench, and it was really an egalitarian space.
This is what
You
all
heard this
JNU,
all too.
all JNU people say
Yeah.
this. I studied in a Catholic institution, right? I mean, वहाँ पे भी यही होता था. You had somebody whose father was a peon, and you had somebody who's an industrialist daughter.
No, in the sense that
I studied in an army school,
Huh.
and we had a JCO's kid also, and we had a colonel's daughter also. So it didn't matter, and we were sitting in the canteen. कोई JNU कोई अलग ही चीज नहीं थी. I don't know why. It's like and I'm saying this about JNU. I'd say the same thing about Stephens.
Okay.
Because in Stephens in Delhi, Stephanians also have this view कि हम कोई अलग ही चीज हैं. नहीं है. आप लोग सब एक जैसे हो. I wish anybody would realize कि चश्मा उतारो और देख लो तुम कोई अलग
So if you want me to go into that, I'll try to explain this
Okay,
very quickly.
sure.
So in our schools, the fee structure is such that the rich kids go to the private schools, or at least even the upper middle class kids will go to the private schools. But people who have absolutely no means, they will go to government schools, right? With the result, what happens is the standard in the private schools is really, really good because the parents will hold the school administration accountable. Sarkari school में कोई standard नहीं है. I mean, forget what the Delhi government. Delhi government is doing a good job in Delhi. That's a separate thing. But in general, across the country, Sarkari school mein you don't actually have good facilities. Why is this happening? Because there is a segregation. The rich kids study here, the poor kids study there. But when you come to JNU, it has an egalitarian fee structure. By that I mean that the fees are nominal, which and it's also an elite university at the same time. So it is both a privilege. I wouldn't say privilege, but it's a prestige point even for a minister's daughter to go to JNU, right? Because it's a good university, academically speaking.
Okay.
And at the same time, this person can also hold, this minister whose daughter is studying there, he can hold the administration accountable if the academic standards fall, right? So that ensures the fact that rich kids study there. It ensures that the academic standard is good. And at the same time, poor people study there. So the academic standard is good for them as well. Is it without problems? No, we never used to think that JNU is an island because we used to point out problems with, caste discrimination, etc., etc. There is gender discrimination, there is sexual harassment, etc. So we were very critical of our university as well. So while the tone was celebratory towards JNU, it was also critical. So that's one thing you learn in JNU, to basically criticize everything. And I think that, as I said, is a rite of passage for every aware, thinking individual. I mean, there are many people who go to JNU. They don't get affected by the politics
Did you use
at all.
the platform at any point of time for Kashmiri separatism to eulogize, say, Afzal Guru and to the others?
So I'm surprised that this is still sort of a question, but what happens in JNU is overall all the student groups in JNU, barring say the NSUI ABVP, they will take an anti-death penalty position in general. And it is this sort of like global narrative of abolition of death penalty, because earlier you used to have the death penalty when we didn't have the prison system. So people would be guillotined, or they would be, hanged publicly, etc. But once the prison system developed, so it's a difference between a retributive system of justice and a restorative system of justice. So what people in JNU advocate, and people generally on the left of the spectrum all over the world, they advocate a reformative or a restorative system of justice.
So if Afzal Guru had not been a Kashmiri, you would not have...
No, of course, there was that element. People were, of course, because there were a lot of things. I mean, people in Kashmir, they thought that Afzal Guru has been hanged. without due process.
नहीं, कश्मीर में तो
Sorry,
अलग
it's
है.
not without due process. I mean, like, yes, people in Kashmir did believe that for electoral gains, he was hurriedly executed. You know, while people who had been sentenced before him, they were sort of, they
And
were
this
still
is
on
when
the
it
death
is a
row.
Dr. Manmohan Singh government in power.
Yeah, and they had to face elections, and they took a political decision to hang him. That is the general feeling in Kashmir. So yeah, obviously, I mean, see, this is no secret. Identity is a great mobilizing factor in this country. So if somebody from Tamil Nadu is given the death penalty, people in Tamil Nadu will agitate. Identity is,
So it wasn't just
it
the
is a
capital
factor.
punishment, it was also you being a Kashmiri and Afzal Guru being a Muslim.
It's not about
both
me.
those things.
There are people, there are student groups who oppose the death penalty per se. So, for example, my student group and the people who organized that event, for example, they also supported, people's right to self-determination. Let's just say, right? So there are different motivations for different people. There are different narratives.
Did
but
you
yes,
support at that time the right for self-determination?
I mean, see, I was a union representative, and one thing that you do as an elected representative, you have to be very conscious of the fact that you do not just represent your party. Yes, my party's position was anti-death penalty. I sort of endorsed that position. But at the same time, you are representing an entire university. And not everyone in the university agrees with self-determination. Many people will say that, no, nothing doing in Kashmir is part of India, right? So I was representing everybody, even though, only like my supporters voted for me. But, you have to understand that I, as a union representative, represent all the sections of the university. So no, I think I took a very measured approach. I had to balance out things. I had to also fight back against, the narrative that was being pushed that, JNU mein aisa hota hai, JNU mein waisa. A lot of perverted kind of things were said about the university. I had to battle that. And at the same time, I had to ensure that I'm not taking a position that everybody in the university does not agree with. Because that was a moment where I became the spokesperson of the university at the national, even international level. So I did not want to say any such thing that, everybody in the university did not agree with. So we even engaged with the right wing. We even gave space to the right wing to speak at those protests, because we are not a party. Unlike, say, for example, the faction that organized the original protest. They were a party. They are not bound to give everybody representation. But we, as a union, we are bound to give everybody representation. And I made sure that I steered the narrative very effectively and, without causing further chaos at that point. Because there are poor kids who study in the university. I do not have the right to, take it to a point where the university is shut down and these poor kids suffer. Their education gets hampered. No, I think that would be an injustice. And in any case, my party did not support that position. So, in JNU, what happens is the student union, they have to, when the student union gets elected, there is a meeting immediately afterwards of the union office bearers. And they come out with a common minimum program of sorts. So with us, there was even a right-wing member, the joint secretary was from the ABVP. So we have to stick to a agenda, which everybody agrees on. These things, these resolutions, they are called. They are voted upon. That, what is your position on Israel-Palestine? What is your position on reservation? What is your position on LGBT movement? So everything under the sun, basically, classic revolutionary politics, university level. So we voted on those resolutions, and there was a common minimum, sort of program that nobody can go beyond, So
that is what you sign up. But then at those protests, there was talk of self-determination and Kashmiri separatism.
Yeah, but
all
even
that
for
did come up.
self-determination, see, there are various shades of opinion, right? We cannot police we are not the, ideological police or anything. There are various shades of opinion. But what
was
we
yours?
need to understand, I mean, human rights, anti-death penalty, all of that, right? That was the position. But what we need to understand that even for self-determination, when you actually go and read the 47-48 resolutions, Pakistan needs to evacuate from POJK first, right? Only then there will be a plebiscite. So even if we talk about self-determination, even if we talk about the core, proposals that
How
talk
many
about
Kashmiris were talking this language, Shehla? Now, after the abrogation, yes.
You mean Kashmiris in the university or Kashmiris?
Kashmiris outside of Kashmir, Kashmiris in Kashmir,
and
very
by
few.
this language, you mean sort of the nuanced language or the blanket language?
No, everybody, whether it was Omar Abdullah's NC, yes, he would talk about Kashmir, about Pakistan a bit. Farooq would talk a little bit, but look at Mehbooba Mufti, and especially after the abrogation, none of them are talking about that at all. They're not talking about कि हाँ POJK को vacate करो. The Indian line, which was the Indian line, you are talking about it now, but never was that spoken in Kashmir, right?
Certainly, I think that when you are trying to sort of mobilize people, so there is the difference between like theory and ideology is that ideology wants to mobilize. So ideology will try to gloss over some, like theory will be very systematic. Theory will talk about, this factual things and everything. But ideology, because it seeks to mobilize, it will gloss over some
Politicians
facts.
will. I get that.
always happens. So
let's get back to JNU, because otherwise again we'll slip into Kashmir. I wanted, remember when I started, I said I'll talk about Kanhaiya and Umar later. Looking at your tweets, you haven't spoken about Umar Khalid all that much. He was part of that student unrest at that period of time.
Yeah.
And he is still incarcerated. What do you have to say to that? Like, why did you not speak out in his favor?
I mean, I did speak out. I mean, I want him to, be released and clear his name, because I believe that he's not a, I mean, he hasn't advocated terrorism. He hasn't advocated, any sort of dangerous ideology that at least I am aware of, right? I have spoken about it. But at, when they were arrested, when Kanhaiya and Umar were arrested as students of the university, I, as a union representative, had a much greater responsibility to speak about them, because all said and done, all ideological differences apart, none of us were holding guns. None of us were advocating guns. We were not advocating any, overthrowing of the Indian state or whatever. None of that thing. There were red lines that, even we, I mean, looking from outside, it may not seem such, but even we had our red lines. So at that time, as students of the university, I had a larger responsibility, as the union representative, to speak about them. However, after that, I think all of our lives, they've taken very different turns. Kanhaiya is in Congress, Umar was in the anti-CAA protests and all of that. So our lives have evolved. I mean, I've been forget speaking about anyone else. I've been trying to figure out, what's my place as a citizen in this country.
Why did you not slip into the anti-CAA protest in a more vigorous manner? Did you not see that as something that would propel you to a bigger role in politics?
I had, by then I had taken a leave, I would say, from politics and activism, because it was after the abrogation of Article 370. So for the longest time, I didn't even know much about it, because I was in Kashmir, and there was like a internet ban and all of that. So I didn't know very much. I was studying. I was, working on my thesis at that time. But I also, I was very deeply, I would say, what should I say? I mean, I don't know whether to say this on camera, but I was going through a personal health crisis. I had a ligament injury. And I was also sort of contemplating. I mean, I took a step back because abrogation happened. Our whatever brief flirtation with politics ended. That internship with politics, that just
with
ended.
Shah Faesal and the other.
Yeah, that ended. And I just took a moment to slow down and sit down and think, okay, where do we go from here? What do we do? What do I personally, what do I believe in anymore? What is my ideology? So I had to deal with those, what should I say, existential questions almost, where I had to define what I stand for. And it has taken a whole 3 years for me to, come out of my cocoon. So I went into my own sort of cocoon where I was dealing with mental health issues. My khala was very unwell at that time. My youngest khala, I mean, she passed away in 2020. She was very unwell. She had a botched up surgery, which left her semi-paralyzed. So I was in therapy at that time already. And, I was dealing with these issues of guilt that happen, like when a family member falls ill. Then you deal with this guilt, could I have done more? Was I absent? Was I not there enough? So I've dealt with a whole bunch of complex emotions.
And your father is saying that you were getting money from terror organizations.
That's another thing, yeah. I mean, when we decided to stand up to him finally, you are generally afraid of your father. Generally, any father, even a gentle father. Children will be afraid of their father. But, when it's a violent father, you are even more afraid of him. So for the longest time, we did not stand up for our mother because we couldn't. We were so afraid. She was so afraid. And when we did finally, he decided to seek vendetta in this very novel way. I think he created a world record of sorts by, going on TV and saying those things. So yeah, I was
Did he
dealing
give
with that
any
as well.
proof of you getting funding?
There isn't any proof. I mean, we weren't getting any funding. I mean, yeah, maybe if we had gotten to the election stage, maybe then we would have to take funding from, I don't know, corporates or whatever it was. But we never got to that stage. I mean, we were in politics for 3 months. So we did not need any funding.
Also,
We
some
didn't get any
NGO
funding.
that he said that
Yeah, that is all baseless. I mean, that's just...
Did you present proof in court that you were not?
No, we were investigated. We were investigated by the police, CID, and whatever number of agencies there are. And we cooperated with them and we gave them all of this. See, the thing is, I mean, I knew that he was going to do this. He had threatened me several times. Whenever we would stand up to him, whenever we would tell him, do not abuse our mother, do not beat her up, he would say that, I would go to the press, I will go to Z Media and whatever. So at one point, Smita, I had to make a choice between my mother's life and my reputation. Which one is bigger? So for the longest time, I kept prioritizing my reputation that, if we take some measure against him, if we go to the court, he will do this. We were aware of it. But it became a question of my mother's life and safety versus my reputation. So I decided to risk my reputation and save my mother's life. And she deserves justice. So she does not deserve, after taking care of everyone, she's taken care of my father her entire life. She's taken care of us. She's taken care of my Khala. She was a full-time caretaker for my Khala who was, when she was paralyzed. She's taking care of our grandmother right now. So after taking care of everybody, after serving this government honestly, she's been one of the most honest persons in public life that I know of. She doesn't deserve to get beaten up and abused, after retirement. She doesn't deserve all of this violence after taking care of everybody. So I think we had to make that choice.
You mentioned the Shopian incident in that. I'm going just to read out. There was this interview and you were asked about that. And in a Twitter thread, you alleged that the Indian Army tortured people in Shopian. This was the question put to you. And amplified their voices to terrorize others. How did you come to know it? To which you replied in that interview, I got this from someone who came to Delhi from Shopian. I know the exact details of the place where this happened, but I do not want to give them away in case a state agency may go there. Time will prove who is right and who's wrong. I'm not lying. If anything, this should make the government more alert to avoid such abuse of human rights. Now, you've been to Kashmir after that. Did you go to Shopian? Did you check for yourself? The reason I'm asking this is that many Kashmiris talk about gang rapes done by the army. It becomes like an urban legend. And then generations of people believe in that, that this is what happened. I'm not going to go into incident by incident, but this is what happened. So when this happened, there was police case filed against you and for that. Did you go back to Shopian? Did you check?
No, I'll tell you honestly. At that time, because no information was coming out of Kashmir, I had somehow taken this upon myself to bring out the real information from Kashmir. And in that thread in question, which caused the FIR and all of that, I have said good things also about the administration, which the administration was doing. But of course, I mean, there's a study done. There's a study on Twitter. And it has found that, I forget what the names of the authors, but it has found that negative tweets get more traction than positive tweets.
True.
So the positive thing will never get more traction. It will get. However, as I see it now, I don't think it was my place to put out that information. I regret putting out that information because no, I did not verify it myself. I believe that the person who was telling me, he wasn't telling it to me so that I will put it on social media. No, it was my decision to publish. So the police even asked me, who is this person who has told you? I decided not to throw them under the bus because it was my decision to publish. And I understand that it was an ill-considered decision to publish it.
A lot of the foreign media who didn't go at that time to Kashmir, even national media couldn't go because of the abrogation process which was going on, revocation of the special status. Abrogation is a wrong word. But the special status, and there was a clampdown for a year almost. So the foreign media was basing its reportage on what your voices were saying.
Some media channels actually went there. I think New York Times did a report
on
this.
One or two,
and,
probably.
They did a report. I did not. And I regret putting out that information because I think that it was used by a lot of anti-India forces here and abroad. And yeah, it is, these things become truisms of sorts, as you said.
Yeah.
This, army rapes in Kashmir, it's a truism, and everybody believes it to be true, or everybody keeps repeating it, that kind of a thing. But I did not check it myself, and I realized that it wasn't my place to put it out. So yeah, I regret putting out those tweets.
So now that you've taken the turn, you realize, and you have even praised the Home Minister, you've praised the
Yeah.
Prime Minister, you've praised the Indian Army, which is literally something that Kashmiris didn't do for decades together.
Yeah.
You've praised, and it's wrong for me to say Kashmiris as a whole, a
I
certain
understand,
section
yeah,
of
generally.
Kashmir. Yeah. Now, when you do that, you lose friends, you lose a certain section for whom you were a heroine of sorts. Do you regret that?
I think that, as I said, some of the things that I've said, they've been used by anti-India forces in India and abroad for furthering a certain narrative. So I think it's also my duty. I'm speaking from a sense of duty. I'm not in politics anymore. I've just been selected as an assistant professor. I've been studying with my head down for the last 3 years. So now that I'm not in politics anymore, I believe that I am at a much more freedom to say what I want. And, I want to point out one thing. I have topped every exam since childhood that I've appeared in, okay? I got into campus placement, I was not discriminated against in campus placement. And I've never personally faced any discrimination from the army or anything, right? But there is a certain narrative that goes around that army is like this or army is like that. You hear stories, and yeah, I mean, there may have been some incidents, during the when the insurgency was at peak, etc. Yeah, you hear certain things, then you form a certain narrative, and you feel discriminated not because discrimination has happened against you, but because there is a narrative, which is why now I feel it is my duty as a youngster, as somebody, a lot of people also look up to me academically. They seek advice from me. How did you get into all these institutions? How did you clear this exam? I was even giving, coaching for CSAT. So earlier this summer. So I feel it is my duty to put out the correct narrative. Because I have alienated myself from the progress of this country. How? 10 years ago, I was placed in a corporate company, and I left that, because I was moved by the human rights and everything. Today, I could have been like my classmates. They are in senior leadership positions in corporate companies. What did I do? I mean, like this whole burden of, sort of being revolutionary comes on to Kashmiris or Muslims or whatever, because we feel this perceived sense of injustice. There was no sense of injustice. I got placed along with the others, and I was doing pretty well. But because of this second-hand narrative of injustice or this second-hand sense of victimization that was pushed on to me, I left all of it. I alienated myself from, the progress of this country, which is becoming a digital superpower of sorts right now. I don't want others to do the same. And that's the only reason I'm speaking out. I mean, tomorrow I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be teaching sociology in a college. What should be my message to the youth? My message should not be that, भाई यहाँ इंडिया में बहुत discrimination है, आप घर पे बैठ जाओ, हमारा कुछ नहीं होना है. It shouldn't be like that. There are so many Kashmiris, there are so many Muslims who are doing so well. They are pilots, they are engineers, they are doing so well, in India, abroad, etc. The message that I want to send out is that rely on your own experiences. What the power of narrative does is that it negates your own experiences. It negates your lived experiences because you believe in a certain narrative and you feel discriminated. Yes, they may have. I'm not saying that there is all is hunky-dory in this country. Of course, it's a post-colonial South Asian country. Yeah, there are many problems in this country. Will there be problems? Yeah, there will be 100 problems. But what do we do? Do we harp on the problems, or do we contribute? Do we find ways of contributing to the progress of this country? I think that we should do the latter, and that should be my message to the people. Right now, we see a really well-intentioned administration, the Honorable Prime Minister. He doesn't care about criticism. He has taken so many radical decisions, even at the cost of his personal popularity. He doesn't care about criticism. He's a selfless man who is working for the national interest. You look at the Honorable Home Minister. He has ensured peace in Kashmir, regardless of what anyone criticized at that time. He has ensured peace and security in Kashmir. Kashmiri mothers, Kashmiri parents, they will be grateful to him for generations because their boys have been saved. You and I, we can say whatever we want. But, the mother who loses a child, only she knows how painful that is. So I think Kashmiri mothers are going to, um, what should I say, praise the Home Minister for, generations to come for, ensuring. And I hope that this peace lasts. I hope that, this kind of present situation continues to prevail. The LG administration. As I said, like they've ensured peace, they've ensured accountability, they've ensured transparency. When I was going for this sociology entrance exam, this assistant professor exam, so a candidate came up to me and he said कि आपने last time दिया था exam जब ये हुआ था, and I said कि कब हुआ था last time? So he said 2016. So since 2016, now recruitments are happening. Of course, it will have a positive impact.
You brought this thing of Kashmiri mothers. We had General Dhillon out here, who was in Kashmir. You even praised the Chinar Corps. He was in the Chinar Corps at that time. And he said that one of the things they did was speak with Kashmiri mothers and ask Kashmiri mothers whose sons have gone and become terrorists, become separatists, उनको वापस लाने के लिए, speak to them. Very potent force, a potent voice.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about Kashmiri mothers.
Yeah.
They're legendary figures, right? So, but I was just watching a couple of videos which came out from Palestine, and there are women and there are men who've lost loved ones, and they say that, ठीक है, there are various voices which are coming out, but I've heard voices now, this battle. इंतफादा अलग बात थी, पर अभी मैं सुन रही हूँ, वहाँ कह रहे हैं कि एक भाई चला गया, कोई बात नहीं. It's part of the jihad. This narrative was also there in Kashmir, that I have lost a son, I will give 2 more sons to the jihad. Did you hear that voice when you were...
No, I haven't heard it. And certainly, like, one thing that has been, that should be crystal clear right now, is that Kashmir is not Gaza. There is a, Gaza is walled off from Israel. There is a, they need work permits. Do we need work permits to work in India? No. We are full citizens of the country. We can work anywhere we want. We can take property anywhere we want. There are some schemes. There is, for example, PM Kisan Nidhi Samman Yojana and PM Mudra Yojana. More than 1/3 of the beneficiaries are Muslims, right? More than 1/3. Like our population percentage may be whatever, 14-17%, but more than 33% of the beneficiaries are Muslims. So there is no systematic discrimination. There is no exclusion of Muslims from the system. Yeah, अब ये होगा, कोई appeasement नहीं होगा. There won't be any special treatment just because you're a Muslim. You cannot expect that. But you will also not be discriminated against, if you are really capable. So for us as Muslim youth, as Kashmiri youth, whatever you want to call it, so for us the task right now is to equip ourselves in this digital economy, in this, burgeoning economy that we are a part of, to equip ourselves with the right skills, with the futuristic skills, to focus on the positives, to focus on what we can achieve. Because, we can keep saying, we are sitting here in Delhi, in Muradabad, or, wherever in Jhansi, wherever, some incident is happening. We can keep talking about it, right? We can keep talking about it on loop. But whatever we say here, we need to realize whatever we say in Delhi and in these, metropolitan cities, it has zero resonance in the hinterlands. They require their own process. They are much farther behind on, the level of development, the awareness of civic identity. So for them, the identity is still, maybe based on community or whatever, and then the country. हमारे बोलने से यहाँ पे कुछ नहीं होगा. We can keep on talking on loop कि lynching गलत है, ये गलत है, वो होता रहेगा. So what we need to do is, and we need to become role models. I think that one of the in sociological analysis, especially in black neighborhoods in the US, there is this whole concept of role models. So what happens is that from the black neighborhoods, the affluent ones, they move out. So then the people over there who are left behind, they have no role models to look up to. I think that we need to become, like all of us as Muslim youth or as Kashmiri youth, and there are already people, who are doing very well in various fields. We need to become role models so that people in our community think that if this one can do it being a Muslim, or if this one can do it being a Kashmiri, I can also do it.
Then why did you and Shah Faesal not continue with your political dreams? Like, why is it still that Kashmiris, if elections were to be held today or in 2024 with the general elections, if they are with the same choices before them, either Mehbooba Mufti's PDP or Umar Abdullah's NC, Farooq Abdullah Umar Abdullah's NC. Why is it that there is no option for Kashmiris?
It's not right for me to comment on other political parties, so I will not go there. But I think the case, like we were a case of precocious politicians in their 30s. It's never too late for politics in India, and I think we jumped into politics far too soon. We had no idea. I will not speak for Dr. Shah Faesal, but I'll speak for myself. I had zero idea how. I had just come from this university idealism, of politics that things should be a certain way. So the first time I got a request for a sifarish, I lashed out at that person. And I was like, what is he doing in government service if he's not attending his job? Like, why do you want him reinstated? My mother, look at her. She's been in the essential services all her life. We've never spent an Eid with her. She's been working in snowfall, in curfew. Why do you want sifarish? So I've grown up with this ethic that my mother had imparted. I've seen her as a public servant. And she used to help everybody at the hospital. Any patient would come, hamari help kar do, doctor ko dikhana hai, absolute strangers. She would help them. But if someone would say if someone would come back, after going into good health, if they would come back with a patty of apples, she would say, sorry, this is haram income for me. I cannot take it. Only my salary is halal. I cannot take this. This will be haram. And, she used to believe this, that, if we take something that is not ours, we'll get some sort of disease or whatever,
You influenced a lot by your mother's
absolutely,
views.
yeah, because she single-handedly
Tell
brought
me,
me up.
I want to know your views about hijab. Did you wear a hijab at any point of time? And what is your view? I don't mean to put you down. If
No,
you
not
did
at all,
wear,
not at
I'm perfectly fine if you say that hijab is something that women should wear. That's up to you to have your views about it. Do you still feel that the hijab ban is wrong? What is your view about it?
I'll tell you my personal view because I'm not, as I
Sure,
said,
absolutely.
speaking from any political perspective. I wore the hijab in 12th class and I was reading a lot of like Islamic literature at that time. And I went very deep into it and I realized that, I should do this. But after a while, like I gave it up on my own. So nobody ever forced me. Nobody
Your mother
asked me,
didn't tell you,
no.
pehno or
Or otherwise, yeah. Nobody ever
Okay.
told me. So I was like doing a lot of self-study of religious literature and all of that. What I believe, I'll come straight to the hijab ban. Why was I supporting the girls' right to wear the hijab? One point, simple. For many girls, it is a passport to get out of home. Even to this date, when I dress in a certain way, my mother will tell me, ye mat pehno, aise rakho, don't do this, baal khule mat rakho, whatever, whatever a usual mother will tell you, because there is so many, bad things happening out there. They want their daughters to be safe, right? And they have a certain perception कि अगर हमारी बेटी इस तरह से कपड़े पहनेगी, she will be safe. Whatever it is, whether it comes from culture, religion, it probably comes from all of those things. We are given certain prescriptions कि 7 बजे से पहले घर आना, which boys don't get, right? So for many girls, if you tell them कि आप hijab मत पहनो, it's possible, and it's not idealistic, it's not perfect, but and it's not sort of academically or politically correct, but they may be told that sorry, you cannot go to school anymore or whatever, you need to be homeschooled or whatever. So for many girls, it might actually be the first step towards freedom. It might be the first step in getting out, and then they can make their own choices. I believe that faith is a very personal sort of it's a deeply personal affair, and it is between myself and my God. It's a very deeply personal relationship, and people who are very preachy, like even Muslim people, right? They will oppose LGBT rights. So what do I say to them? I've been very vocal about that. I will say कि भाई आप फैसला मत करो, ठीक? There will be a judgment day where God will judge them, and they will give their hisab to God, right? Whatever they are, LGBT, जो कुछ भी है, they will tell God why I did what I did, and they will be judged accordingly. It is their personal relationship. You don't get into that. Whatever they're, they may be better in Iman, they may be better Muslims, they may be doing better charity for all we know, right? So our priority should be to perfect our own Iman. So for example, many things that I do, they are religiously motivated. So for example, I don't lie. I have a very strong, sort of inhibition against lying. That comes from religion. Now, whether or not I'm religious, I've read somewhere that, you cannot be a true Muslim if you lie, for example, or if I do charity. that comes from a religious thing, right? So there are many things. I mean, religion is not just about hijab. So similarly, a woman, when she decides to wear the hijab, its genesis can be patriarchal or whatever you want to call it, but it is also like she has a relationship with her own God, which she wants to, if she thinks that it will please her God that she wears a hijab, or if it will please her God that she does XYZ thing, she's also a thinking individual. It's not just that the hijab is forced. She's also an individual. She's also a member of the faith, member of the community. And she can decide for herself what she wants tomorrow. If she decides she doesn't want to wear the hijab, fair enough.
Okay.
But it's not for me to say what her relationship with God should look like.
Okay. Since you speak so much about human rights and you are, you have been, you've been very vocal about, having a broad view when it comes to women's rights also. What do you have to feel? What do you have to say about what Nupur went through? Do you feel that she's a victim, or do you feel that she had it coming for taking a radical point of view?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know what exactly she said, but I saw like things on TV. Of course, it was all over the TV. What I feel and what I've realized is that, as a rational person who also does not identify as an atheist, I do not identify as an atheist, but I call myself a rational person or whatever. I feel that there is a place for faith and there is a place for science. You will see doctors, Muslim doctors at times, who actually work on CRISPR technology, but at the same time, they will believe in creationism, right? What is this? This is a contradiction. So on the one hand, you are denying evolution and genetics and all of that. At the same time, professionally in your practice, you are doing that. How did I reconcile the two? I mean, there are many religious beliefs that may come across as irrational or whatever. I think it's the case with all faith. Now, I'll give a personal example. I believe that, by the time I am older or by the time the next generation comes, India will be safer for women. Or, someday we will get rid of rape and harassment that women face, right? Is it an irrational belief? Looking at the present things, it might come across as an irrational belief. But there's a place in my heart for it that I want women to be safe. It's a faith that, one day we will have a better world. It may be irrational, the world may get worse, right, for women. But it is a faith that I hold. And it may not be scientifically supported. Scientifically, we may be told that, yes, women will continue to get more free and men will there will be a backlash from men against that. So scientifically, there might be more violence against women in the future. But this is something that I hold, as an article of faith that, women should be safe, right? So I believe that there is a place for faith and there is a place for science. And when you look at the creation of the universe and all of that, right? There are questions that can be, now with certainty, with the James Webb telescope and all of that, we can say a lot of things with certainty. But there are certain questions which still remain at the level of metaphysics, which physics cannot explain. So I believe I've learned to steer clear of people's faiths, whatever they want to believe in, as long as it is not infringing upon my rights or someone else's constitutional rights. Yes, then the state has a right to intervene.
Okay, when I asked you the question on Nupur, it wasn't so much about her being a Hindu and saying it, or her saying something anti-Islamic. That's not what I was alluding to. What I was saying was, as a woman, you're also taking a stand as a woman, as a Muslim woman, as a Kashmiri woman. You're taking all three are your identities. We have multiple identities,
Correct, yeah.
right, as
Yeah.
citizens.
Yeah.
Now you have these three very strong identities. Besides being a successful career woman, you have that too. Now, Nupur was all those three things too. She's a Hindu, she's a politician who's a Hindu, she's a very vocal politician, and she's faced this kind of harassment. Now, what happens is, what I'm trying to say is that because of the stand that you are taking now, God forbid that, you could face that kind of violence, or you could face that kind of threats and things like that, because you are taking a very radical point of view. She took a very radical point of view. Does that in any way make you feel that there is a kinship that you feel with her or people like her?
I would not describe it as kinship, certainly. But yeah, have we all experienced this in the public sphere? Absolutely. Like, there are landmines that you are often told to steer clear of because they invite a backlash that is so huge. I mean, if you look at the history of Section 295A of the Indian Penal Code, Why did the British bring in Section 295A? Because in the absence of it, people took matters into their own hands. There was a case of the the Rangila Rasool controversy basically, and the person who published it, he was lynched in open court by Ilmuddin. And after that, the British brought in this. So this has always been there. Yes, like certainly in an ideal world, we would not see this kind of vigilantism. And yeah, if like somebody's saying something, like we can address it by debate, etc. Yes, those are things in an ideal world. But yeah, we've all come across these. I mean, religion, nationalism, these are landmines. The moment you say something, like you become, I can definitely relate to it. I wouldn't describe it as kinship, but I can definitely relate to, what one goes through, because like one thing that, I mean, it's like an arrow that you shoot. You say something from a public platform and yeah, it can invite all sorts of backlash.
Did you at any point of time, did somebody tell you, or did any organization tell you that what the hell are you doing? Why are you speaking on, in favor of the Indian government or in favor of the Indian army? Has that come to you?
So I've described this echo chamber of sorts that I've been part of for the longest time. So these are friends. I mean, I don't mean echo chamber as a derogatory word or something, even though it has a sort of negative connotation. But there are people like who will say, oh, why are you saying this? My simple answer has been that because it is true. That's why I'm saying this. I mean, I'm not saying that there are no problems in the country. हमने मतलब सब कुछ मतलब एक दिन अमृत काल आ गया है, women violence खत्म हो गया है, सब कुछ खत्म हो गया. No, it's not that. But if certain things are happening, I've always been a critic of the centre's Kashmir policy. So if now the Kashmir policy is good, I would invite people to debate me on facts. As I mentioned, like there has in fact been a court-martial of, some army personnel who were involved in a fake encounter. Isn't that all what we were asking all along? And I feel that a lot of people like who say this, who will say this, oh, why are you saying this? They haven't actually visited Kashmir recently. And they haven't seen the kind of, change, whether the visible change, the change at the level of perception, the change in, this identity crisis. Like they haven't seen those changes that I'm talking about. So that's why, I think that's why I decided to speak out, because as I said, there are congressional committee reports in the US that will still say ki restore Kashmir, internet in Kashmir, whereas internet is in full bloom, 5G is working, everything is working. But a lot of these narratives are, whether they are motivated, they know, and they are still saying certain things, or they don't want to be seen as opposing. So it's, as I said, it's a feature of our times. It's polarization. Just because we don't want to acknowledge our opponents' achievements. And I think that's not good for democracy, because in a democracy, we have other models, right? We have models where members of the opposition after election, they are co-opted to, actually hold office in the government. There are those kind of models as well. Why can't we have that kind of a model?
What would you say to Kashmiri Pandits who feel that we still don't feel safe? We still can't go and, buy land or go there back because we don't know when things will slip out of control.
I can understand, because, every time I was talking about the change situation in Kashmir, I was doing this touch wood, right? Because for the longest time, we are not used to anything good happening in Kashmir. And it's a sort of trauma response that, like, even when you're so used to bad things happening, even when something good happens, you actually don't believe it. I again hope I'm not speaking too soon, but recently I was just driving around with my friends in Srinagar, and they showed me those flats that have been built for migrant pandits. So they are in Srinagar, they are in a good area, Hyderpora area. We know that there are security concerns. So, it's not for me to say that, it's safe. So I think that's the government's sort of...
And what would you say if somebody turns around and watches this show and says, don't believe her, she belongs to the urban Naxal gang, she belongs to the... And abhi wo aise keh rahi hai, baad mein change kar sakti hain, her stance. What would you say to that then?
I've realized one thing. In public life, you cannot convince everybody. But the only thing that you can do is... preserve your own integrity, at least in your own eyes. People are going to be skeptical. People are always going to say those things. When I was at the height of my anti-BJP activism, people in Kashmir used to say, "Arey, to BJP agent hai." People are going to say anything. That's the thing. People say and believe the worst kind of things.
No, when you were anti-BJP, they said you're pro-BJP.
They would say ye BJP agent hai, because all kinds of conspiracy theories go around, right? And people will continue to say whatever they want to say. So I've realized one thing, that you have to stop the obsession with what people are saying, because people have no idea of your reality, and they will say things that are absolutely divorced from reality, and that's a fact that we deal with, right? But I would only say two things. I would say that integrity requires us to have congruence between our actions, thoughts, and beliefs. So if I'm acting in a certain way, if I'm going and writing the civil services exam, I'm placing my faith in the fairness of a system. If I'm going and I top an exam, then it's testament to the fact that there is no discrimination. What did we think? Like when abrogation happened, what did we think? We thought that पूरा delimitation हो गया तो जम्मू को ज़्यादा seats मिल जाएंगी, कश्मीर को कम seat मिलेगा. ये एक narrative था. Did that happen? No, that did not happen. Actually, Kashmir got more seats in the delimitation than Jammu. We said कि नहीं अब तो ये सारा कुछ जम्मू वालों को दे देंगे, ये सब कुछ चलता है, ठीक है. But you look at the assistant professor lists that have come. All the candidates from Jammu, they had to actually come to Srinagar for the interview, right? But there's no big conspiracy happening. And like the toppers, they're all Kashmiris, and at some places the toppers are from Jammu. जो हमने ये पूरा नैरेटिव बना लिया है ना कि like there is a big conspiracy, बाहर के लोगों को बसाया जाएगा, that didn't happen. So I think that we need to preserve our own integrity. अगर आपको domicile certificate सबसे पहले मिल रहा है, I think I must have been one of the first people.
That domicile certificate I want to come back to, because there's this, you said that there was no discrimination. It was completely agnostic of caste, religion, everything. But there's this thing that about the Kashmiri family card. The state ID card. There's this, last year it had come out that the Jammu Kashmir family card niklega. And the government says that the objective is to create an authentic, verified and reliable database of families in J&K to make sure welfare schemes reach eligible beneficiaries faster and in a more transparent manner. Because there was always this thing of, these welfare measures, there's leakage. The corruption in Jammu and Kashmir is legendary. Sure. Everybody knows about how the loans and everything happened. Right? All those bade makan that you see, even as soon as you land, that's all a testament to the fact that a number of them were created because of the leakages that happened in the welfare schemes. Now, the criticism of this family ID card is, so when it comes to identity cards, traditionally Kashmiris don't like it. कि वो शनाख्त parade होगा, ID card निकालो. So whereas an ID card, an Aadhaar card, a driving license in the rest of the country doesn't mean much, in Northeast India and in Kashmir, it has different significance. Now people like us who are reporters have gone, interacted, seen and understand it slightly more than probably those who don't travel to those to conflict zones basically and to border areas. Now the narrative in the foreign press is that, oh look, this is being done purposely so that they can identify kaun hai, kaun nahi hai and things like that. And the J&K former chief minister, PDP chief, and she called it, quote, another surveillance tactic to tighten the iron grip on the lives of Kashmiri people. This is what she said. Now, you have an experience of Aadhaar card, of the domicile card. Do you feel that another ID card is unnecessary, or do you feel that Kashmiri should be open to another one?
First of all, I have to admit I don't know about this particular card that you are talking about, but I'll start by saying a word about the foreign press and all of that. There is this whole sort of virtue signaling towards India, which is, I feel, borderline racist in nature, which is that the Western media should lecture us, how to run our country. And for the longest time, we also used to consume this kind of narrative. But now you see the failure of Western interventionism in Gaza. The entire Western institutions together, they've failed to they've failed to effect even a ceasefire in Gaza, right? And they are unanimously and without qualification supporting Israel's right to deal with its security issues however it deems fit. But when we come to India, even though in India there is peace, there is, everything, institutions are working, there is this sort of like lecturing tone, this kind of preachy tone that, India should not do this. Now, I'm not aware about this particular scheme as such, but I think that there are various schemes such as Ayushman Bharat and this PMJ, Jan Arogya Yojana, health insurance, etc., which takes the family as a unit. Because the 5 lakh insurance that it has, it's for the family as such. So maybe it is for those kind of schemes. I don't know. I'll be honest about that. But yeah, I mean, whatever governance initiatives the government is bringing, yes, we should criticize whenever we feel something wrong. But we should also not spin conspiracy theories. And what the politicians say, I don't want to attack anyone in particular. I mean, you mentioned Mehbooba ji. I don't know what she said exactly. I don't want to attack her. But what politicians say, that has a certain value for narrative and political purposes. But the people, common people on that, and this is something that I found during my research as well, that the common people will actually rush to get those cards, quickest, because they don't want to be left out of any scheme. There is this golden card, which is, very famous in Kashmir. Golden card, basically, it gives you, access to some healthcare benefits and all of that. It's a coveted, like people are running from pillar to post to get that golden card, to avail of these medical facilities. So one of the very popular things in Kashmir, it is called, colloquially, it is called the Modi Dukan, which is these Jan Arogya Kendras, Jan Aushadhi Kendra. So in which you get generic medicine at very... so in my brief flirtation with politics, when I went to the city, I mean the Srinagar city I'll talk about, there is... extreme urban poverty, and people come to you and they say कि आप कहीं पे political meeting करते हो, वो आपको बोलते हैं मैडम जॉब लगा दो, और आप उनसे पूछते हो कि I get personally moved from this because I am from downtown Srinagar, and आप उनसे पूछते हो आपकी educational qualification क्या है, कहाँ तक पढ़ा है, वो बोलते हैं हमने 6th तक पढ़ा है, 6th class तक, 7th class तक पढ़ा है, क्या जॉब मिलेगा, मतलब आजकल PhD को PN का जॉब नहीं मिल रहा है. And you see these people are in abject poverty, at least in Srinagar, like there is terrible poverty. And one of the main things that people used to come to us for was कि हमारा महीने का इतना खर्चा आता है diabetes medicine, life-saving medicines which you have to take, you have no choice. Diabetes का medicine है, किसी चीज़ का medicine है, asthma का, हमारा इतना महीने का खर्चा आता है. Can you please give us this kind of financial support?
Yeah, dialysis नहीं है, dialysis machines कम है.
Yeah.
And they'll die if they don't get dialysis.
Yeah. Now, I'm not an anarchist. I support welfare, and for welfare, you need state. You need state intervention. And I think that we need to recognize that the state has come out with very good, initiatives such as this Ayushman Bharat insurance scheme, this Jan Aushadhi scheme, which is very popular in Kashmir. I think it is very much in touch with the realities of the ground because it is addressing as a newbie politician with no financial support.
So they associated with Modi?
So it's called the Modi Dukan. जैसे लोग बोलते हैं कि वहाँ कहाँ जाना है, मोदी दुकान पे जाना है, या मुझे वहाँ पे छोड़ दो, मोदी दुकान पे छोड़ दो.
It's easier to say it than Jan Aushadhi Kendra.
Jan Aushadhi Kendra, yeah, nobody uses that term.
So the BJP is not seen as a villain all that much, thanks to...
No, that's what I'm saying. See, politically हम लोग बहुत कुछ बोलते हैं और हम लोग बहुत कुछ बोलेंगे. लेकिन जो ground पे लोग हैं, they rush. It is their priority to get generic medicines. See, if you are a leftist.
But vote नहीं देंगे BJP को.
That's not for me to say. No, that's not. I will not answer that.
No, I'm just saying that even when you speak to the BJP, they'll say that. That there are certain areas where because of these schemes which are agnostic to religion, everybody gets benefit. But when it comes to voting, there is a separate mentality that comes in.
First of all, in Srinagar, the historical voting record has been 20%.
Yeah.
Like that's the historic voting. In the last by-election that happened, the voting percentage was at 7%. And I think Farooq Saab won with some 2% votes or something. So first of all, voting वहाँ पे है ही नहीं इतना. Unless the BJP can mobilize new voters, because all the existing voters are cadre voters of parties. So that's a separate, when you go to vote, 100 things play into that.
Yeah, lot of things. True.
Yeah, but this is about the government.
Where is your voter
card?
You have a voter ID card or you don't?
I have applied. It's stuck in some I had uploaded an expired ID and then it's stuck and whatever. But yeah, I did. It's
you will vote in 2024.
I had actually applied for that voter card thing online because I was, it's also part of my work. I need to keep figuring out how digital India and digital governance is working. Then I did something stupid and it got stuck. But whatever, the online services in Kashmir, there are 914 online services. 914 services have been digitalized. So there is no human interface. What that means at a, sort of personal level is that you do not have to go before any bureaucrat or politician and supplicate. earlier these very, very simple things, people were held hostage for these kind of things. कि अगर आपको street light चाहिए, like this is a big thing in politics, कि हमारे यहाँ से street light लगवा दो. I didn't get the whole thing about the street lights. या अगर किसी को कोई document चाहिए, तो पहले सिफारिश करवाना है. Now actually, I mean, now institutions are working. Now processes are working without political interference. So I think that's a great sort of thing that you need to acknowledge. And like,
So where is Shehla Rashid going from here now? Like, do you want to just keep away from politics, that I cannot do this? Because to bring about change is not easy. Either
No,
you're an
not at all.
activist,
Yeah.
or you're a journalist, or you are a academician, or you are a politician, or you're a bureaucrat. How do you bring change to the lives of people? If that is what you want to do, which is help people, how do you plan to do it?
One thing that I've realized is, how they say on airplanes that put on your own mask first and then you can help the others. So I think that I need to figure out some things about my own life first. I need to, I've got this new job and I've got my PhD to work on. So I think that I'm also working on my, sort of research. So those kind of things I'm doing at the moment. But at the same time, as a citizen, I do feel responsible because, a lot of people keep writing to me. I get so many emails from all over the country, so many messages on Instagram that, you've been an inspiration for us. Why are you not speaking against the government anymore, etc. This, that, right? So maybe somewhere I have led people into a path of cynicism towards the government, which I think I really need to address. And I want to contribute positively. I want to contribute. I don't want to harp on negative things because I think it affected my own mental health also very negatively. When you keep watching videos of, certain horrors, or when you keep focusing on negative things, it affects you mentally. There are good things happening, and let's just go along with those good things. Let's see what we can contribute, As I said, like my message to people who look up to me, regardless of whether they are Muslim or not, a lot of young people also look up to me. My message to them should not be ki, there is a big bad state which is going to be enabled by a digital surveillance project, which is Digital India, which is the kind of narrative that I put out earlier. But when I actually navigated Digital India, when I actually navigated government processes, that is not happening. It's a conspiracy theory. So I think it's really important for me to, put out the right message about, I think the foreign policy. Let me give you an example. I mean, I was talking about this welfare, right? If you're a leftist, you should support this kind of, welfare initiative, generic medicines. This is a huge talking point in the left politics, actually, that insulin was actually developed by someone free of cost, and then some other companies came and they licensed it, right? So life-saving drugs should not be patented. At the same time, if we have a Jan Aushadhi program in our country, should we not appreciate it? You tell me as a leftist. We should, because this generic medicine is a huge talking point in the left. Similarly, with the foreign policy, I mean, I'm very much impressed. I mean, I'm also biased because Dr. Jaishankar is from our university.
JNU, yes.
Yes. So there is a certain bias at work over there. But I mean, if you look at objectively, I've read his book, I've seen his engagements. And as a leftist, should you not support that kind of foreign policy where we are neither lackeys of the US, nor we are acknowledging the Cold War narrative of Russia. We are not acknowledging the Cold War binary that Russia wants to force on us. We are not towing anybody's line. We are taking an independent stance, as Dr. Jaishankar says in his books, like that we need to have strategic clarity about our own objectives. We are leading the global South voices, and we are engaging with the least developed countries. And at the same time, we are the third largest economy. And this requires a certain kind of foreign policy, which speaks from a third world perspective, but at the same time, it also speaks to a first world hegemony. I mean, we talk about multilateral reform of multilateral institutions, reform of global institutions. I think that the kind of foreign policy that we have at this moment, I think regardless of political lines, we should endorse it. Now, my sort of personal project here is to walk away from polarization. Because what happens due to polarization? There is one kind of polarization which is political. BJP versus the rest, all of that, right? There is another kind of polarization, which is that if Muslims continue to feel this way, and as we said, they are the second largest majority, if Muslims continue to feel a certain way, India is going to the moon. India is, like leading global voice, global South voices. India is at a very unique position, like in space science, vaccine science, so many other things, we are leading. Muslims should not become alienated from that progress, from that national development. And that is also an aspect of polarization. It's not just political polarization, it's polarization on identity lines. So, yes, we may have to ignore certain things, we may have to ignore some noises. What can we contribute? What can we become? Is there any limitation on that? No, there is no limitation. If you are a Muslim, you can very well, you can become the prime minister, you can go into ISRO, you can become whatever you want, you can become a corporate leader, whatever it is that you want. I mean, digital public infrastructure is secular, and our governance is moving more towards the digital. So maybe it's premature, but I don't think it's unfounded to say that we are actually moving towards secularization by virtue of digitalization.
So do you feel that Muslim reservation is something that is needed because otherwise there can't be equality, or do you feel that it should be open competition for everything?
Regardless of whether we have reservation or not, there should be self-representation. I mean, I have variously described myself as a feminist, leftist, Ambedkarite, and I'm very inspired by Dr. Ambedkar, by his intellect, and I've read his readings, his writings very extensively. So he talked, the core of Ambedkarite thought is self-representation. So regardless of whether you have reservation or you don't have reservation, self-representation is important, and that is something that I believe in. Muslims should be represented, and it's not that only a Muslim can represent a Muslim, but yes, should there be more Muslims in representation? Yeah, there should be.
फिर आप क्यों नहीं आ रहे politics में? What is the
It's
hesitation?
never too late for politics in India. I think I can wait for getting retired, and then I can join politics.
But there are lots of people who feel that the BJP will benefit with you being in the party because you're a progressive Indian Muslim. So why not the BJP? And the Congress, of course, has a number of progressive Muslim women in their party. And then you have the choice of the NC or the PDP, both Kashmiri political parties. So you have the field right open before you. Any political party would want you there. So why
I think it's, for me now, it's less a question of, which party or whatever I go with. The greater question for me that I have to answer, when I grow old and when I am 60 or when I'm 80, I don't want to confront the question of what did I contribute? What are the narratives that I furthered? Did I contribute to the victimization or victimhood complex of my community? Did I hold them back from progress? I think I'm going to be confronted with those questions when I turn 60 or 80. So the priority for me today is not which party I join or whatever. Like that's a moot question. The question is, what are the things that I'm going to contribute to? Will I contribute to a positive narrative, or will I continue to harp on those negative things that I have done in the past? And as I said, it's never too late for politics in India. I mean, I can easily retire at 60, 65 and then join politics. Who knows?
Okay. So just towards the end, let's lighten the mood. We've talked about such serious things.
Yeah.
What is the kind of cuisine that you like to eat the most?
Oh,
Is it,
okay.
Every Kashmiri says it's Kashmiri food that I like the most.
Yeah, Wazwan,
One,
yeah.
two. Two is that when you want to chill, what would you want to do? As a Kashmiri, what do Kashmiris really like to do? Is it to watch cricket? Is it to watch a film? Is it music? And as a Kashmiri woman, what would these two things tell me?
So cuisine, I like Asian. I can't handle spicy food, so I like.
Seriously?
Yeah. So I don't like Thai. I like Balinese, for example, or Vietnamese. Something that is gentle, very gentle on the palate. Vazwan, contrary to popular opinion, it's spicy, but it's not hot. So it has a lot of these aromatic spices. So actually, if you eat Vazwan, it's not very hot. So yeah, definitely. I love Vazwan. But I like Asian cuisine the best, like Japanese, Balinese, Vietnamese, all of that. Whatever is gentle on spices. And I get fascinated, when I went to Japan, I got fascinated by the variety of things that you can do with food, right? With the same basic elements, fish, rice, and whatever, seaweed or whatever they use. With those three basic ingredients, you can do such a wide variety of things. And it's the same with music, with some notes, just a limited number of notes. People create such masterpieces. So yeah, I like music, but I also, there are Kashmiris and then there are Kashmiris. So some Kashmiris like to watch cricket, some Kashmiris. I enjoy hiking. I really love going into the mountains and doing that, yeah.
Of course, I would presume that your state is so blessed. So obviously,
touch wood,
yeah. Do you wait for the time where Kashmir will get statehood all over again? Does that matter to you?
I mean, I joke about it. The other day, I was sitting down with some friends. Some are, with NC, some are sympathetic to the BJP, and they started some ideological fight. So I was like, यार तुम दोनों जितना जल्दी दोस्ती कर लोगे उतना जल्दी स्टेटहुड आ जाएगा. So NC BJP की गवर्नमेंट बना लो कश्मीर में, स्टेटहुड आ जाएगा. So stop fighting already. But yeah, I mean, see, what we need to understand is that in the past there has been a perception that India is a soft state, or India should not deal with its security issues as it sees fit. So the constitution provides for this temporary suspension of statehood or having a union territory. It is within the constitutional ambit. So for a while, if for dealing with certain security concerns and certain security priorities, if the state is, the Indian state has every right to deal with its security issues as it sees fit. So if, I'm nobody to say that they should do this a certain way. I'm sure the Home Ministry has a much better analysis of the security situation on the ground.
Do you feel less of a citizen because you don't have statehood?
Initially, of course, I mean, it felt like a blow, especially sort of the decision to try bifurcate the state, bifurcate it into two union territories. So it felt like a link with Ladakh was severed. And I had been to I had been to Kargil, Gurez, all of these areas, and I had connected with the people. It was a really pleasant experience. It did feel a little emotional. There was an emotional pinch to it that Kargil is no longer part of it, and especially say, for example, state services. So many exams have been held. So yeah, they are not able to. Kargil people are not able to compete in those state services. Something should be done about that, because ultimately these are all categories and labels. State hai, union territory hai, whatever. Even Delhi is a union territory. So these are all labels. But yeah, like something should be done about the fact that Kargil people can no longer, or not just Kargil. I mean, I've only been to Kargil, but Leh, Ladakh in general, those people can no longer compete.
You're talking about this incident where, your friends are sitting and they have different political thought and all. And from personal experience, I can tell you, post 2014, this has happened to everybody. It's not just, Kashmiris, but it's happened everywhere, that there are these divisions which are covered. Even within the family, there's a pro-BJP element, there's a pro-Congress, and there's, one lot which wants Modi to return in 2024, one lot that says Rahul Gandhi is the savior of the nation. And in the same family, there are very, very strong points of view. What happens when you guys get together? Is it just this bipolar thing of pro and anti-BJP, or then there are these cross purposes of NC and the PDP also that happens? How are these crisscrosses?
So I think it's a little different from the national level polarization that happened, because I think the Congress system, when it, in political science, I mean, we use the term Congress system. So when the Congress system sort of vanished and it was initially replaced by the regional parties, the conglomerate of regional parties, and then the BJP, when existing political equations get disturbed, there are bound to be frictions, because there was an entire system around the Congress, and that got disturbed. And then there was a change of power. There's going to be a friction. But at the sort of state level or UT level, I think everybody sort of recognizes that NC is the big player. They have the cadre, they have the emotional connect, and they have a legacy and all of that. But there's also this realization that, BJP would want to take the credit of the security situation and of, restoring the statehood. So yeah, that's why I made that joke that, the sooner that NC and BJP ally with one another, the better it is for statehood. But of course, they will have their own things to say about this. They'll not like it that I'm saying that. They're part of the India alliance.
So they don't want to, yeah. So Shehla, finally, I want to ask you this. Your mother plays a very important role in your life. When you decided, or it was a gradual process, what you're telling me is that. But when you decided to speak out in favor of the BJP, did your mother caution you, and did that matter?
I did not speak in favor of the BJP per se.
Modi
I mean,
and
yeah, I mean,
the
see, he's
Home
everyone's
Minister.
prime minister. The LG, he's everybody's LG. And there is a realization on the ground that the Honorable Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Manoj Sinha, he's very much connected to the ground. You know, he's not sitting in some ivory tower in Raj Bhavan and actually ruling from there. No, he's very much connected to the realities on the ground, and he has fulfilled a lot of aspirations as an aspirant myself. जब मैंने फॉर्म भरा सोशियोलॉजी का पॉलिटिकल साइंस, आई हैड पुट इन फिलोसफी ऑल्सो, फिलोसफी असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर ऑल्सो. मैंने सोचा पता नहीं कब आएगा, मतलब हु नोज़. मैं फ़िलहाल तीनों का भर देती हूँ. तो 3 साल बाद नोटिफिकेशन आएगा कि नोटिफिकेशन कैंसिल हो गया. दैट डिडंट हैपन. लाइक विद इन द डे वी रोट द मेंस एग्जाम, आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट द स्टेट सिविल सर्विसेज. The day we finished writing the mains exam, the next day the notification for this came. So they are also positively engaging the youth. What is happening is that अभी आपने एक एग्जाम दिया नहीं है, दूसरा एग्जाम स्टार्ट हो रहा है. एंड मतलब मैंने क्या किया था, मैंने CSAT की कोचिंग स्टार्टेड गिविंग CSAT कोचिंग टू स्टूडेंट्स. उतने में ही एग्जाम का नोटिफिकेशन आ गया. आई वाज लाइक, ओके, दे एक्चुअली मीन इट, you know. They are actually going to hold the exam. So I stopped everything and I just started studying very seriously for the exams. So I'm telling you, as a common person, you know, these things matter. Like now if you go to Polo View now, earlier it was always like a parking hassle, जगह नहीं मिल रही है, शोर है इतना. Now if you go there, I mean, the other day I took a cab from Polo View, and I felt like I am in, I don't know, Western Europe somewhere. You know, the kind of makeover, and like it's a global trend. It is in line with the global trend of decongesting the inner cities. So in central London, if you go with your car, there will be a certain kind of tax that will be deducted automatically. So it is in line with the global trend. So whatever, you know, Srinagar, smart city, whatever, you can also see it. It's visible, right? And you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, there is something called Kashmiri exceptionalism. कि ये तो दिल्ली में चलता है, ये तो यहाँ पे नहीं चलेगा, ठीक है? But now you actually see the things working there. I mean, earlier the civil services exam would not be held for 2.5 years. And now in less than 2 years, you have 3 civil services exams that are being held, right? So they are actually trying to catch up with and they are even exceeding the UPSC, right? So that kind of exceptionalism has, you know, somewhere vanished, and it's to the benefit of the people. So I think everybody can see it. So no, I did not receive any particular backlash. Yeah, like I spoke to friends and I was like, यार सच्ची तो है ना कि मतलब यही तो हम बोल रहे थे कि लड़के नहीं मरने चाहिए, वो तो हो रहा है, like that thing is happening. And as politicians, we can keep saying all sorts of things, but the mother who loses her son, she only knows, you know, what's the palpable change, what's the visible change on the ground. Only she knows.
Well, as you kept saying all through the podcast, touch wood, touch wood. I think we should end with that and say touch wood, and hope Kashmir progresses and stays on the path of settling all issues which were troubling the country and the state. Thank you so much, Shehla, for being part of this podcast, and wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you so much. Same to you.
Thank you for watching or listening in to this edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Do like or subscribe and share on whichever channel you have seen this or heard